bright future.
She just was like a magnet. She was very, very pretty, but also very smart.
Is the victim of a truly disturbing murder.
He'd been struck on the head many times.
It's kind of the horror story.
The body itself appeared to have been washed. Jewelry had been put on her after the fact.
She had been staged for this suspect's desires. Who could have done this? Could it be somebody who likes her, somebody who has a fantasy over her?
Detectives hunt for a deranged killer.
We noticed bloodied palm print.
Police had collected about 100 different print impressions.
We could be looking for a serial killer.
Just when it looks like justice may never be served.
It was extremely frustrating.
A stunning discovery points to a murderer in their midst.
When we found out who it was like, are you kidding? Nobody could believe it.
Less than an hour outside Los Angeles, Irvine, California is a peaceful community with a coastal vibe.
Irvine is very, very pretty. It is pretty much the hub of Orange County. The ocean's only 10 minutes away, and this is where everybody wanted to be.
Irvine has always been considered to be a very safe city and has not been known for violence.
On May 14th, 1979, Irvine's sense of safety is shattered when a man calls 911 to say he can't get a hold of his 22-year-old girlfriend, Savannah Anderson.
Earlier that day, her boyfriend went over to her residence to meet her at about 6 o'clock. He couldn't get any response at the door.
He went back home for a while, couldn't get a hold of her still.
He called the police department about 7:25 p.m. It was a welfare check. Her boyfriend indicated that she had not been feeling well, and so there was a concern that it could be a health issue. When the officer arrived, he met her boyfriend, Bill Mills, and another man, Ken Bergenson, who identified himself as her boss.
They explained they'd both come to the apartment to try to find out if she was okay because nobody'd been able to get a hold of her that day.
I was very fortunate to work with Savannah. Savannah was always prompt, and she didn't come that day. All day long, it was like trying to get a hold of her, no answers. By the end of the day, we were very concerned something might have happened because that wasn't like her.
The officer found the apartment was in fact locked up tight. There was no key available from the apartment office. The officer found out that a bedroom window nearby was unlocked from the inside. He was able to open that bedroom window.
When the officer made entry, he was able to see a woman with a lot of blood around her, lying in bed, towels wrapped around her face and head. She was cold to the touch.
Both Savannah's boyfriend and boss are taken to the station for questioning, while homicide investigators are called to the scene.
When I walked in, it appeared to me that there was a struggle, a fight, and it was very clear that she was attacked on the bed, and she laid on the bed for some time due to the amount of blood that had pooled in that area. A lot of blood splattering against the back of the wall and the headboard.
She also had towels over her face. After the towels were taken off, her face was found out to be beaten very severely, excessively.
The towels were significant. It tells you that the killer may have known her and didn't want to look at what they've done.
It appeared that the body of the victim had been beaten with something hard.
She had multiple defensive marks on her arms, her hands, nail marks around the neck area, which would indicate that she also had a ligature that had been placed around her neck.
The legs were slightly raised as if some sexual activity may have occurred there.
Perhaps she was the victim of a sexual assault.
The degree of violence to Savannah's body was unusual. Did somebody do it because they were angry at her? If they were angry at her, is that because they knew her, they loved her, they hated her?
Based on the state of the body, police believe Savannah was likely killed in the early hours of the morning. Looking closer, several details strike investigators as highly unusual.
Savannah had some jewelry on her. There was a necklace around her neck, and the clasp was at the front. There's also a watch on her arm that looked like it had just been put on there loosely.
We were surprised to see that those items were still intact on her based upon the brutality of her attacker. So it appeared that he may have just put those items back on her.
The body itself appeared to have been washed, as there's very little blood on the skin surface of the victim.
We noticed drag marks from the bed onto the carpet leading into the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, there was diluted blood with water around the sink area and also the bathtub.
She looked like she had been cleaned up and set in a particular position on the bed. It was staged for this suspect's desires. And I think that was important to get an idea of what this type of person was willing to do to Savannah's body, put things on her, put clothes on her, whatever.
It was very unusual for any type of murder, in my opinion. It looks like somebody wanted to make it look like she was fine and nothing was wrong.
Police find some important clues the killer left behind.
We noticed bloodied palm print leading from the bedroom into the bathroom. Palm prints are identifiable just like fingerprints. There were smudged, bloodied fingerprints on the toilet seat.
They were basically the only way that we'd be able to find out who the killer might have been. There was no DNA at the time.
Detectives find no murder weapon or any sign of forced entry.
We made the determination that the killer may have been known by Savannah and let him in through the front door. Another theory was through an unlocked open window.
After finishing up at the scene, detectives break the news of Savannah's death to her loved ones.
The parents lived in Utah. When I spoke to Savannah's mother on the phone, she was devastated by this. It was her only child. It's probably hard for most people to realize, first of all, what it's like to lose a child, let alone the only child you have. Savannah's mother said Savannah had made a collect call to her about 10 o'clock the previous day on Mother's Day evening. They had talked on the phone for about 2 hours. Savannah was very happy, good mood. That must have made it even more so difficult.
When I found out what had happened to Savannah, we were all totally shocked. My heart just hurt so much. How very sad this beautiful young lady, her life was gone. It's very senseless, very, very hard to understand.
Born in 1956, Savannah Anderson grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and had big dreams.
She was 22 when she moved to Irvine. She came here looking for a better opportunity. She was very independent, and she wanted to do it on her own. I met Savannah when she was working here for Commercial Credit. Savannah was a secretary for the operations manager. She just was like a magnet. She was very, very pretty. I remember when people did come in the office, especially the men, she did attract attention.
Savannah was flattered, but she did have a boyfriend, Bill Mills, whom she met 3 months after moving to California.
She was more of a private person into herself as far as not one to just open up and tell everybody what she was doing. She was definitely on the shy side. When I found out what had happened to Savannah, I felt angry and just crushed and so hurt. My first thought was just how tragic this was. I just can't imagine.
It's kind of the horror story. Who could have done this? Could it be somebody close to her, somebody who knows her, somebody who likes her, somebody who has a fantasy over her? When you have a brutal killing like Savannah's case, detectives immediately looked for the people that are close to her, her boyfriend.
The fact that Bill The boyfriend was the one who called the police. Is he innocently calling the police here because he doesn't know that something had happened to her? Or is he the one who may have done it, so he contacted the police to say, gee, something might be wrong, with the hopes that the police will go ahead and discover the crime and then say, well, it can't be the boyfriend because he called us here. Could it be almost a way out to try to point the finger away from you? It's just something you have to look into.
Coming up, police question the grieving boyfriend to see if he has something to hide.
His attorney advised him not to take a polygraph.
And detectives uncover more suspects.
Why is he here now at this time? That was suspicious.
Somebody was lying.
Another crime turns the investigation on its head.
This individual was responsible for 5 murders. Perhaps she was the victim of this killer.
And the perpetrator's identity leaves everyone in shock.
It was absolutely devastating when we found out who it was.
Police investigating the gruesome murder of 22-year-old Savannah Anderson have their first suspect, her boyfriend, Bill Mills.
When you have a crime of passion where somebody is murdered, there are definitely times when a boyfriend who just got angry and upset did the crime.
The first thing we did was began meeting with Bill Mills so we could understand better about Savannah, his relationship.
Bill tells police he and Savannah started dating 6 months ago, and he was in love.
They had met each other in another apartment community. They had gotten along well.
He was about 9 years older than Savannah. In talking with him, had learned that he had just asked her to marry him.
Police are curious if something came up to disrupt the couple's plans for the future.
It was a large, violent crime scene. Did he do it because he was angry at her?
Bill tells investigators he last saw Savannah a day earlier on May 13th.
They had brunch together, and then he spent the day over at her apartment. During the interview with Bill Mills, we found out that Savannah and he did have sex that day. So that would be important later on in case there was semen found inside of her.
Bill told me on the 13th he left her apartment at about 10 p.m.
Once he did leave, what happened to him? Can anybody account for his activity after he apparently left her apartment?
He said he went home, he went to bed, and then to work the following day.
Bill says he and Savannah had plans on the 14th after they both got off work.
He went to her apartment about 6, knocked, couldn't raise her. He went back home for a while, then Bill Mills went ahead and contacted the police department.
Bill denies having anything to do with Savannah's death.
It appeared that Bill Mills was really in love with her, thought it was a very serious relationship. He was very happy with her.
Bill was cooperative. He tried to assist us as much as he could.
But there is one request Bill won't comply with.
There is a red flag. He was asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph. He contacted an attorney, and his attorney advised him not to take one.
We did ask if we could see his body, his hands, his arms, see if there's any indications of a struggle with anybody. But his body was clean. We asked him if we could go ahead and take his finger and palm prints. He agreed to let us do that.
It will be weeks before the results come in. In the meantime, detectives are forced to let Bill go. Next, they move on to another man in Savannah's life.
Part of the investigation and process was to meet with her boss, Ken Bergeson, who had been at the crime scene. In speaking with him, he said he had known her in Salt Lake and had offered her a job locally here.
Ken Bergeson also said that he kind of considered himself a father figure to her. He helped her move. They had talked many times, been out for drinks, been out for lunch and different things.
Could Ken have wanted more than a professional relationship with Savannah?
Was anything going on romantically in the present day?
I asked Ken where he was the night of May 13th, and he indicated that he was with his wife that whole evening.
We did contact the wife to verify that, and there's no reason to believe that he was anywhere but at his home that night.
After the interview, we asked Ken to submit his prints so they could be compared against the crime scene.
We just let him go home that night after the interview.
The police questioned each one of us in the office. I worked for Ken Bergerson at the time. He was just such a nice guy and so concerned about her. She was living by herself, and she was just so beautiful. I just thought, somebody saw her. Somebody was either stalking her or something happened. But I was just so angry that somebody could possibly do something like this. It had to have been somebody I thought who was very sick.
There was nothing really that drew anyone's attention to any issues that Savannah had at work, and nothing came of it.
Police canvassed the apartment complex the next day, searching for witnesses.
We didn't find anyone that said that they'd heard any struggle or screams to corroborate when that attack may have occurred. There were 2 security guards that were assigned to the complex. It was a multi-unit, under construction.
So after I got the names of the security personnel who worked that night, which was about a week after we originally responded out there, I talked to the security guard first who worked the midnight to 6:30 shift. His name was Chuck Doyle.
According to Doyle, security was hired to ensure the residents were safe and to overlook any construction sites and that sort of thing for theft.
Chuck tells investigators on a usual shift he would drive through the complex and also patrol by foot.
I asked him how he found out about the murder of the woman, and he said he found out through the company. I asked him if he knew the lady who lived there, showed him 2 pictures, and he picked out the picture of Savannah Anderson.
When asked about his dealings with Savannah, Chuck's answer gives investigators cause for concern.
He indicated about a month prior that he'd helped Savannah gain entry into her apartment and slid a window open for her.
It was notable that Mr. Doyle had said he was aware that at least at that time one of the windows was unlocked.
Doyle said, "You'll find my fingerprints on Savannah's window, and this is the reason why." Immediately, we printed him. It really made me zero in on him as a potential suspect.
A week after Savannah Anderson was found bludgeoned to death in her bed, security guard Chuck Doyle has drawn suspicion after admitting that his fingerprints are likely on her unlocked window.
She had locked herself out of her apartment before, contacted him while he was on the site to see if he could help her get into the apartment. The security did not have any pass keys. He found that a window was unlocked. He was able to slide the window open. He also said that he didn't go inside. Now, it could be for a couple of reasons. Could be perfectly innocent that he didn't go inside. Could also be to say, well, I didn't go inside if he may have somehow be involved in the death.
Had Chuck slipped in through the same unlocked window to kill Savannah? Police press him for his movements that night.
Chuck Doyle said that he reported for duty on the 14th at midnight, or was supposed to, indicated that he was about 10 minutes, 15 minutes late.
He was supposed to replace a security guard named Bob Sellers.
He drove by Savannah's and saw her talking on the phone. He thought maybe that was around 12:15 or so, 12:20, but was not certain.
He went and parked next to Bob Sellers' car. About 12:30, he estimated, Sellers approached. He got daily reports from Sellers, and then Sellers went ahead and got in his car and drove off.
When detectives ask what happened next, Chuck's answer raises even more suspicion.
He said he drove around a while, went back to the carport, and went to sleep, which would seem very odd.
He thought he probably nodded off for a while.
Doyle says that he was awoken by a car door slam. It was Sellers who had returned and invited him to breakfast. Doyle says it was maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. They went to breakfast at Spire's restaurant, a 24-hour cafe.
The cafe is just 10 minutes from the complex.
Doyle said that he was dropped off by Sellers at about 2:30 in the morning.
Chuck says the rest of his shift was uneventful, and he clocked out at 6:30 a.m.
There's just something really unusual about the sequence of events that's being described by Doyle.
Investigators are left with more questions than answers. Did Savannah die on Chuck's watch? Or was he the one who killed her? Hoping for clarity and to corroborate Chuck's story, they turn to the other security guard, Robert Sellers.
Robert Sellers enlisted into the Marine Corps at age 17. He's 22 now.
He was assigned that day to work from about 4 in the afternoon, and he was supposed to get off at about midnight that night. I asked him if he knew who Savannah Anderson was. He said he had talked to both her and her boyfriend that evening.
Sellers told me that he thought he saw Savannah around 10 p.m. on the phone.
Robert confirms that Chuck was late for work, so he didn't leave the apartment complex until around 12:30 a.m.
After leaving Doyle, he then went home, showered.
As a U.S. Marine, he was supposed to go to a Marine base at 6 o'clock in the morning.
He decided it wasn't worth trying to go to sleep, so he thought, well, I'll just go out to breakfast with Doyle. So that's when he returned.
Sellers told me that he came back to the complex about 3:30, which is an hour and a half or 2 hours after what Doyle recalled this happening. So there was this inconsistency between the both of them about what time they must have gone to the restaurant. Sellers said there's a waitress named Gail who waited on him. I took note of that. At the end of the Sellers interview, we asked if he would go ahead and give us finger palm prints, which he agreed to.
Investigators hope the autopsy report can help them pinpoint Savannah's time of death.
According to the coroner's report, Savannah Anderson died at approximately 2 a.m. on May 14th. The cause of death was strangulation.
She'd been struck on the head many times, found multiple contusions on her face. There was broken fingernails, a broken jaw, cracked teeth.
We did have biological fluids, semen, that was found, but DNA was not in existence at the time, so we didn't have that tool.
My first thought was just how horrible to die like that. I cried and I was just very upset, just thinking that something like that had happened to a person that was just so lovely. It was just terrible.
If Savannah was killed at 2 a.m., which security guard is telling the truth? Was Chuck really off-site like he claimed? Or was Robert right, meaning Chuck was at the apartment complex when the murder took place?
There was a wide gap and discrepancy between their two stories and timing. So the two were brought in together to try and determine if someone was mistaken about times.
They both basically stuck to their stories. I wasn't sure which either timeline might have been correct, whether it might have been Doyle's or Sellers, because they were just too far apart. So we thought at that time somebody was lying.
Detectives are investigating the disturbing murder of Savannah Anderson. The two security guards from her apartment complex are unable to agree where they were at 2 a.m. when Savannah was killed.
The timing is very sketchy between what Doyle says and what we learned from Sellers.
This is raising a lot of flags to me, because why don't they know where they were and what time they were?
Going over time discrepancies, Doyle said, well, I slept. I could be mistaken. I'm not sure. So Sellers seemed to be more credible time-wise.
According to Robert Sellers, Chuck was on duty at 2 a.m., and the pair only went to Spire's restaurant around 3:30 a.m.
I asked one of the patrol guys to go ahead and try to contact any waitress there that might have been named Gail to see if she recalled the security guys coming in there at all. They weren't able to find a Gail that worked at the Spire's restaurant, so we could not identify that particular part of the story. It looked like the best chance of us determining who the suspect was going to be through the fingerprint and palm print evidence left behind. At this time, we already had fingerprints and palm prints from the boyfriend, Bill Mills, the boss, Ken Bergerson, and from the two security guards, Chuck Doyle and Bob Sellers. And I felt that if we can find out if any of those were the palm prints, that's going to be the resolution of our case. We'd be able to determine who had done it. So we sent them away with high hopes that we're going to be able to resolve the case once we get the results back.
While waiting for the results, investigators dig deeper into Savannah's life, hoping something will point to her killer.
Savannah seemed to be a very likable person who had, from all reports, a good mind, good IQ, personable, funny, one that you would be very happy to have as a daughter.
She was very sweet, very sophisticated, quiet. She had very strong values and morals. You know, she was just not one of those that was going to be out looking for trouble. Just how she went and how young she went is so tragic. Our world is, it's cruel.
We interviewed neighbors. Savannah had been at the apartment complex about 6 weeks. Her contacts, friends were very limited. What I learned through investigation was Savannah had moved deliberately for the safety of having security on the premises.
She really wanted a place that felt safe, and the fact that they had security, she loved that aspect of it. She felt really good about where she was going.
2 months after Savannah's death, police received the results of the finger and palm print analysis from the scene.
I was really hoping we heard back from the crime lab that it's going to be one of the guys we'd already talked to.
In terms of identification and finding and identifying that individual, it was everything.
None of the prints that came back were any of the fingerprints submitted from the bloody finger and palm prints. Really disappointing. Couldn't figure out why. It seemed like there should have been somebody in there that was responsible for it, yet the crime lab is telling us that these weren't the responsible parties at all. We thought we had some viable suspect, but we're told, nope, it's not them. Well, now what? Wow.
The results mean Savannah's boyfriend, her boss, and the two security guards are all cleared.
I was very discouraged, but thought, okay, we just haven't come across the perpetrator. He's out there. We'll find him. We'll identify him. I feel comfortable with that based on the palm print.
Detectives immediately looked for people in the area that maybe had criminal histories. They looked at people that had been arrested after that for similar type of break-in crimes. And if they had any suspicions whatsoever, they would get their palm print and their fingerprints, and they'd compare them to the crime scene prints and then rule them out if they didn't match.
3 months after the crime, police had collected about 100 different print impressions.
The palm prints didn't match. It was extremely frustrating to work through this.
With the case threatening to turn cold, detectives refused to quit and take the case in a chilling new direction.
After going through potential suspects that were eliminated through the palm print, we began to examine that Savannah Anderson may be the victim of a serial killer known as the Bedroom Basher. This individual was responsible for 5 murders in the Orange County area at the time.
With a population under 2 million people, the number of attacks in a matter of months is troubling, and the similarities striking.
He would target young lone females between 17 and 35, ground floor apartments, open windows, open doors. Once inside, he would bludgeon, strangle, and sexually assault the females. So Savannah certainly fit that MO. And so we had to take a real strong look at perhaps she was the victim of this individual who had not been identified. We could be looking for a serial killer.
Detectives investigating the brutal murder of Savannah Anderson now believe she may have fallen victim to a serial killer.
Bedroom basher went after females in homes or apartments in the Orange County area, raped them, in at least one case, killed somebody by bludgeoning them, which is what happened to Savannah.
Based upon the number of bludgeonings in Orange County, which were 5, we felt that there would be another that would take place.
5 months after Savannah's murder, investigators' worst fears are confirmed when the serial killer strikes again.
During this time, there was a woman in Orange County that had been attacked, believed by the bedroom basher, who survived and was able to give a description to the police. A composite drawing was made. She described the perpetrator as a male, olive skin, pockmarked face, long hair, mustache, dark eyes, in his late 20s, early 30s. A task force was created in Orange County. Flyers were disseminated to the public and to patrol units. It resulted in multiple contacts of people who believed they knew who this individual was. Unfortunately, none of those resulted in the apprehension of the individual.
A year after the murder, with no arrests and a killer on the loose, women in the area live in a constant state of terror.
The community was definitely impacted by this terrible murder. The news was full of these kind of things, and it did create fear among people. The fact that I was living so close by, it's a little scary.
Any female who resided by themselves took extra precautions to ensure that their windows, doors were in fact locked. Every possibility we looked at, we were unable to make any headway in determining what happened to Savannah Anderson. It was extremely frustrating. There was no one else that we were aware of that could provide any insight and/or potentially could be a suspect.
3 years after Savannah's murder, her case remains unsolved.
After you go through tips, leads, you step back, you re-examine, you say, what did I miss? It's got to be there. What did I miss?
I started to believe that they just weren't going to find out. And that's terrible to think that something like that could happen and that this person is out there roaming around still.
2 more years pass until a rookie homicide detective takes a renewed interest in the case.
Savannah's case was the first cold case that I ever worked. I was familiar with it because I was in patrol when it happened, and I thought, well, nobody's looked at it for a while. Maybe I should look at it.
A friend of mine who knows Larry Montgomery very well calls him the evidence whisperer.
I was aware he was looking at the Savannah Anderson case, and at one point he came to me and we compared notes on it.
After combing through all the evidence, detectives revisit whether Savannah was a victim of the still unidentified bedroom basher.
The possibility that she was killed by a serial killer was definitely looked at. I was looking at anything that I could use to direct me to a possible suspect. I'm looking at what was done at the crime scene, what did the suspect do with the body, what was maybe in his mind because of what he did.
In comparing Savannah's murder to those committed by the bedroom basher, something just doesn't add up.
The one thing that stood out that was not similar was the cleaning up of the victim.
When I look at a crime scene like this, it's somebody who has a desire for Savannah. She appeared uninjured other than towels on top of her face. It wasn't the gore that he liked. He had to kill her in order to get her into a position where he could fantasize about having an actual relationship with her. This is a real girl now as opposed to a dead body. The question in this case is, who did it? All the people we've looked at and that looked good were not matching the prints. There was one point where I started looking at the security guards to see what they were doing, because they were certainly involved in being there at the time. There were very big differences between what Doyle said happened and what Sellers said happened that night. And I thought that was very odd.
I thought at the time that I interviewed Doyle that one of the problems was he may have gone to sleep for a while. That would certainly account for the timeline being different, or his uneasiness in talking to us about that particular time period.
Police quickly locate Chuck and bring him in for another interview. His story about what happened the night of the murder is the same, but a few details stand out.
Doyle said that he got to the site probably 10 minutes late. He had not been able to find the person he was supposed to replace yet, Bob Sellers. About 12:30, Doyle saw Sellers come with a shirt in his hand, and I asked Doyle, did you ever ask him why he was late or why he didn't have his uniform shirt on? He said, no, he never asked him that. He just figures he's on his own time, so he could probably wear whatever he wants.
That's unusual. That right there's a big red flag.
That's not the only thing that raises alarm bells.
Doyle said that Sellers had commented about wanting to have a drink with Savannah. He thought she was very attractive.
Detectives asked Chuck Doyle if Robert Sellers ever confided anything else to him.
Regarding the relationship between Doyle and Sellers, they weren't buddies. They didn't do things together. They weren't really close friends.
Following this lead, investigators asked Chuck if it was common for them to go for breakfast during a shift, like they did the night of the murder.
They never did that before. So why is Sellers there on a night when he's supposed to leave soon to go to work at a Marine base, saying, hey, you want to go get something to eat? It didn't seem to fit. But I had the paperwork that shows that he had been exonerated. It wasn't his print. But I saw all kinds of things that Sellers did that was suspicious. Why is he here now at this time? It all fits if he came back and did something with the body at that time. It all made sense time-wise. And that's when I decided we need to find those prints again and see if we matched them properly.
"5 years after Savannah Anderson was found murdered in her apartment, cold case investigators suspect her killer has been hiding in plain sight the entire time.
I've got a suspicion that this guy, Robert Sellers, might be the guy, because there's too many lies or mistakes. He's already been exonerated, and I didn't believe the exoneration. We need to find somebody who's better than our sheriff's department, who's best in the world that we can get.
Robert's prints and the ones found at the crime scene are rushed to FBI headquarters.
The FBI discovered that some parts of the palm print were so thick with blood that it became a negative. It was the opposite of what it should be because of the thick blood. The thick blood looked like the ridges when really they were the valleys of the print.
The FBI reanalyzed the palm print and compared it to prints obtained from Robert.
The next day, the fingerprint lab at the FBI was able to identify in about 24 points of identification a positive identification of security guard Bob Sellers.
We have to arrest him now. Sellers, at the time that he was arrested, was living in a mobile home up in Brea at the police department. He was presented with evidence that his prints are in fact in the blood there. He didn't come forward right away, but very quickly after he had some lies, he did admit that he did everything that we thought he did.
He was obsessed with her. He found her very attractive. He thought perhaps by going into her apartment that he might convince her of some romantic get-together. He gained entry into her apartment through an unlocked window where he could hear her on the telephone talking with her mother. He stayed in the bedroom, hid as best possible, while she talked in the kitchen living room area. Once she got off the phone, at about a little after 12, she came into the bedroom. When she saw him, she was thinking, I have an intruder, a man in here, and I'm frightened. And he became frightened and realized that he had to silence her. He pulled out his baton and began striking her. He then went to strangulation
During the struggle with Savannah, he said that his shirt got bloody, so he had to take it off. So when he went to see Doyle, he had his shirt in his hand so that his replacement would not see the blood on it.
And then he goes home, gets cleaned up, sneaks back in, and then goes into Savannah's apartment. Sellers wanted her sexually. He had to kill her to get that. He did talk about he wanted her to be clean, and so that's why he drug her into the shower and washed the blood off of her and took her back into the bedroom and wrapped her head in towels because she was so badly beaten. So then he just had a body that was clean and he could have his fantasy. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he's trying to sneak out, and that's when Doyle sees him, and that's when, at the spur of the moment, he has to all of a sudden pretend like, oh, I'm here to go to breakfast with you, okay? He almost seemed relieved when he finally was able to confess that he actually did kill Savannah.
On March 29th, 1984, Robert Sellers is charged with murder, rape, attempted rape, and burglary.
I think after 5 years, he thought he probably did get away with it. In that time, he got married, started a family. The anguish that he caused with Savannah Anderson's death, he didn't deserve having that extra 5 years.
On November 4th, 1986, Robert Sellers is found guilty of first-degree murder and a special circumstance of rape. But his lawyers win his appeal.
His conviction was overturned on a technicality. The fact that the prosecution could not prove that she was alive during the rape changed the verdict for a life without possibility of parole.
Instead of a retrial, prosecutors offer Robert a deal. He accepts to avoid the death penalty and pleads guilty to first-degree murder. He is sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
Here you have a guard, a man, a Marine, placed there to protect the residents, and it turned out he is the one committing the crime. One would not expect the one who is protecting you to be your killer.
It was absolutely devastating when we found out who it was. The irony of it all was the fact that she moved to this beautiful apartment complex thinking she was going to be safe and secure. And it was the security guard that actually did it. It was like, are you kidding? Nobody could believe it.
Authorities don't find anything to link Robert Sellers to the bedroom basher killings. In 1996, Gerald Parker was identified and convicted of those crimes. In 1999, Robert Sellers died in prison.
I do feel there was justice, especially when I found out that he died after he had been in prison. That was justice right there. When I remember Savannah, I think of this beautiful young woman, just the prettiest smile. She was very, very poised. I think she would have definitely had a bright future had her life not been taken in any sense of the manner, whether she had married and had a family or gone on in the business world. She just was a very lovely person.
A loving mother with a selfless spirit.
I remember her laughter. You could hear Mother laughing from 2 rooms away.
She was really representative of the goodness in people. She loved her community. They loved her.
Is stabbed to death in a horrifying attack.
It was gruesome crime scene. There was a lot of blood.
The perpetrator left the victim with a 2-pronged serving fork sticking out of her throat.
The amount of devastation led us to believe that it definitely was a crime of passion.
Suspicion falls on those closest to her.
He was the husband that last saw her alive. He didn't really show any signs of grieving.
He failed the polygraph.
My first thought was that it was a domestic assault.
Her son had an argument with his mother that morning.
A neighbor had seen a teenager running away from the home that day.
Months go by without an arrest.
We kept wondering, why is it so hard to capture a murderer in this small town?
Then, just as the case is in danger of going cold, police uncover a dire warning.
The note threatened more violence
that leads to a deranged killer no one could have predicted.
Wow, we didn't see that coming.
Shenandoah, Iowa is a close-knit farming community home to just 5,500 people.
Shenandoah is your typical small town. It's just beautiful. The corn surrounding the towns. Everybody knows one another. You just are almost shocked at how nice folks are.
It's a small, peaceful community. People know their neighbors, take care of each other. You don't have a lot of violent crime of any nature.
The peace is shattered on September 6, 1988, when police get a disturbing call from local pastor Robert Borton at 3:40 p.m. He tells police his wife of 19 years, Cindy, is dead.
He found her body in the kitchen, lying in a pool of her own blood. He called authorities, who arrived immediately and kept him outside of the house.
It was gruesome crime scene. We found a female on the kitchen floor. There was a lot of blood everywhere. This person had been stabbed many, many times.
The perpetrator left the victim lying on her back in a pool of blood with a two-pronged serving fork sticking out of her throat. That image stayed with me because it was remarkable in its gruesomeness. There were 4 instruments that appeared to come from her kitchen that were weapons of convenience for the killer.
There were 2 forks, a large 2-pronged fork, a 4-pronged fork, as well as 2 knives. There was a struggle. There were some cuts on her hand where she had fought the person and she had tried to get away from the person. The phone had been ripped off of the wall, and it was obvious that a lot of activity went on while Cindy was being killed.
Detectives observed that the pool of blood is not yet dry, meaning the murder likely happened in the late morning or early afternoon.
In addition to the blood in the kitchen, there were also some blood stains found in the bathroom.
It was obvious that the person had cleaned up in the bathroom because there wasn't any visible pools of blood, just blood that looked like it had been washed off of hands or clothing. We did not have the benefit of DNA testing back in the 80s. Blood would have been collected still because you can type the blood, and that was what was one thing that we'd be looking at. And of course, fingerprints, obviously, throughout the crime scene.
There was no forced entry. We were 99% sure that she knew who the perpetrator was. My first thought was that it was a family assault.
The amount of devastation that was there at the crime scene led us to believe that it definitely was a crime of passion.
Detectives had to speak with Cindy's husband, Robert, but are beaten to it by a new arrival at the scene, the couple's 18-year-old son.
I seen an ambulance parked in front of my house, and my father was leaning against the front of my mother's car crying, and I just knew deep down inside me that my world was never going to be the same. I dropped my backpack there in the middle of the yard and went running up to my father, and he then informed me that Mama was gone.
39-year-old Cynthia Borton was a born and bred Iowa girl. She and her brother were raised by loving parents just outside Des Moines.
My mother and my uncle would always tell me about the adventures that they had around the farm. Life was good for them. Everybody had to laugh, according to Mama. I remember her laughter. You could hear Mother laughing from 2 rooms away. You would have to rush in there to find out what it was that was so funny that made Mama laugh.
As a teen, Cindy worked at a local restaurant and soon after would meet her future husband.
My father wound up coming in there and doing the whole phone number exchange thing, and then they started going out, and one thing led to another.
The couple married in 1969. When the family moved to Shenandoah, Cindy had her hands full.
Mama just kind of assumed the role of the pastor's wife. She also worked at a donut place there. Mama always did what she had to do to take care of the family. I was her everything. I was very much a mama's boy. My mother was love personified.
Cindy's warm heart also extended to those outside the family.
Mama always had an open door policy for all of my friends. They always knew that my mother was there to be a second mother to them, somebody that they could talk to, that she never passed judgment on anybody. She was also very good with giving out the hugs. Mama was always there to give you a hand back up if life knocked you down.
Cindy loved her community. They loved her. She was really representative of a small town in Iowa, the goodness in people.
Cindy's death leaves many in the community wondering who could have killed her. Investigators have an idea on where to start.
Back in that time, about 85% of all homicides in the state of Iowa were committed by someone close to the victim. Husband is always a major suspect at the time we see a homicide like this, especially one with so much rage involved.
Robert was interviewed and gave the following timeline. He had gone to work that morning at Select Motors, where he was a part-time worker because preaching to a small rural congregation is not lucrative employment. Robert returned home at noon, as was his habit. His wife served him spaghetti for lunch, and at 1 o'clock he returned to work. Cindy worked at a local bakery. Her shift was to start at 2 o'clock that day. When she didn't show up for work, her employer became concerned and called Robert. He indicated that he thought perhaps she had simply taken a nap and overslept. Approximately an hour or so later, when she still had not shown up for work, he got the second phone call from his wife's employer. He went home at about 3:30 in the afternoon to discover Cindy dead on the kitchen floor.
What Robert says he did next raises a red flag to detectives.
After finding his wife and then calling to get some help, he took the dog out instead of, being there for his wife or trying to do something for his wife. He said he wanted it to be tied up so that the ambulance people wouldn't have to deal with his pets. That was very unusual and very strange.
Then, Robert offers up a theory investigators find completely ludicrous.
Bob was saying that his wife could have just tripped and fell onto this fork. That was totally not plausible. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. It's just, I can't imagine anyone, ending up in a situation, and certainly not with the amount of blood that was found there at the scene, too.
He thought that it was an accident. And that really raised eyebrows. How could you possibly think that someone had just fallen? You just think, well, this is someone who snapped.
Bob Borton was our prime suspect immediately after the death of Cynthia Borton because, first of all, he was the last person to see her alive, and then he also was the one that found her.
Coming up, suspicion swells around Cindy's husband.
His work clothing was laundered before investigators had an opportunity to examine it for blood spatter.
What does Robert Borton have to hide?
The only thing I want him to say is, I did it.
While police dig for evidence against their top suspect, a threatening clue sends shockwaves through the town.
There were a great many different and wild rumors, leaving notes at the scene. Cynthia Borton ain't nothing compared to what's coming. And hints such as the NS Night Stalker.
This story just got even more crazy and more sensational and more scary.
Police in Shenandoah, Iowa are investigating the gruesome murder of 39-year-old Cynthia Borton. Her husband Robert's erratic behavior is putting him in detective spotlight.
Robert commented that his wife had simply fallen on a serving fork and died an accidental death. These comments were certainly unusual and suspicious.
Police bring Robert to the station for a formal interview.
Bob did have a very strange personality and strange mannerisms about him when he was interviewed. He didn't really show any signs of grieving. You would have expected that a man having just lost his wife would be very emotional at the time he was being interviewed, but we didn't see that with Bob Borton. He was very matter-of-fact. He was just so casual in talking even about finding his wife. He acted like that was just everyday thing. You know, it's just like talking about, well, what's the weather going to be like today?
Detectives question Robert about his relationship with Cindy.
He told us about, having arguments once in a while. He went in kind of a defensive mode about the questioning. When they're reacting like that, it does put up a red flag like that.
Investigators try to provoke a telling reaction out of Robert.
He didn't get upset when I accused him of being the one responsible for his wife's death. He didn't show sadness. He didn't cry.
His stoic but unemotional denials only increased their suspicions.
At that point in time, Bob Borton couldn't be held at all. We had no evidence to show that he was responsible. We had no information other than his matter-of-fact attitude.
Robert provides fingerprint samples, but with nothing concrete linking him to the murder, investigators must let him go.
This, frankly, was frustrating to some of the investigators involved in the case.
Cindy's body has been sent to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. While police wait to learn a specific time of death, they look to verify Robert's whereabouts.
His boss alibied him for the time that he said that he was at work that day.
Knowing it's still possible Robert killed Cindy when he went home on his lunch break at noon, what his boss tells detectives next rings alarm bells.
He changed his clothes when he went back to work.
Before the body was found, he dropped off his work clothing. It was laundered before investigators had an opportunity to examine it for blood spatter.
Had this all been part of Robert's well-executed plan?
There isn't always transfer of blood from a victim to a perpetrator, even in an extremely bloody killing such as this one. But of course, the likelihood that there would be made it important to examine the clothing, and that was impossible because those clothes, as it happened, were very quickly laundered.
That certainly was a little detail that made us think that it was him.
Investigators conducted a great deal of background interviews with neighbors, friends, co-workers.
We did look into the relationship between Robert and Cynthia Borton to see if it was a good marriage. And we did determine that they did have some problems. Everything wasn't roses and everything wasn't as you might think.
There was quarreling in the house. We thought maybe he had a lot of rage that he wanted to get rid of, and he was taking it out on Cindy. But we had never been called there for family disturbance or anything.
Needing to verify information about Cindy and Robert's relationship, detectives seek out their son, John, but the teen has vanished.
On the day she passed, all I did was shut down. My best friend, Jim, and his mother and father came driving by in their car and attempted to speak with me. I was not in the mood to talk. And then I just kept on walking.
When John arrives back home that night, detectives are there waiting.
They wanted everything that I could tell them while it was still all fresh in my mind. My father and I were still of the impression that it could have been accidental.
When asked about his parents' relationship, John admits there were problems.
There was some disagreements and a little bit of an argument, and then they realized that could I actually find anybody better for me? The answer they came up with was no, so it's like, we were happy one time. We need to figure this out, get it worked out. That whole part of the wedding vows of till death do us part, they both took that very seriously.
John is too upset to say much more. Police end their conversation, but plan to talk with him again when he's less distraught. Officers are then dispatched to canvass the area around the Borton home.
They talked to the neighbors and tried to find out if there's anybody who witnessed anything suspicious.
A neighbor had seen a teenager running away from the home that day, actually in the afternoon.
The neighbor's description of the teen sounds strikingly familiar.
John Borton, Cynthia's son, fit the description of the person that had run away from the house.
Had John come home early from school to murder his own mother?
It was a fascinating story. It was a mystery. He seemed like your typical teenager.
Bob Borton and also John Borton were the main and only suspects.
That in itself was the shocking part.
Detectives investigating the vicious slaying of Cynthia Borton have two prime suspects. Her husband, Robert, who found her dead, and now their 18-year-old son, who matches the description of a teen seen fleeing the area around the time of the murder.
John Borton, even though he was scheduled to have been at school that day, might have come home early. So John Borton early on was a person that we wanted to talk with and get more details about where he was on that day.
The day after the murder, John is brought to the police department for another interview.
They started with the questions about the home life and everything else. I told them my mother was literally my whole world.
When detectives asked John about the last time he saw his mother, he makes a startling admission.
John indicated in his interview that he had had an argument with his mother that morning. That, of course, was interesting and relevant information.
Mother and I did disagree because I was not in the mood to go to school that day. My last words to my mother that day were a bit harsh. I have zero pride or pleasure that I can take from that particular morning.
John maintains he was at school the entire day, but he didn't have any classes between noon and 3 p.m., the approximate window of time when detectives suspect Cindy was murdered.
The whole tone of the investigation changed. They were considering me personally to be a suspect. Who on earth could think that I would do this to my mother?
In a household with 3 people, the 2 surviving occupants would always be interviewed and looked at to see if they had an alibi.
We tried to determine with anybody at the school to make sure that they saw him there and to make sure that he was, in fact, in school, not just that he was supposed to be in school, but that people actually did see him there during that day.
Investigators took aside 2 of John's friends, Jim and Jackson, to find out if there was anything that might cause them to be concerned about John as a suspect.
The teens can't confirm John was at school the entire day, but they're adamant he's not the killer.
One of the first people to console him about his mother's death was Jim Bettis.
Friends of John Borton said Cynthia Borton's murder had been true devastation for John.
I heard some of my teachers kind of speaking in kind of a low, hushed tone thing that the detectives had come by and questioned them as to whether or not I was actually at school. Could anybody verify that I was there all day like I was supposed to be? Eventually, they were able to reconstruct my alibi for the entire afternoon.
Detectives talked with his teachers who verified that he had spent that full day at school.
Cynthia's son, John, is ruled out as a suspect. 3 days later, the autopsy report comes in, and police look for any insight into what exactly happened that gruesome day.
Cindy suffered a horrifying death. The medical examiner found that Cindy had been stabbed 29 times with at least 4 different instruments, 2 knives and 2 serving forks. In addition to stab wounds that directly led to her death by puncturing vital organs, she had defensive wounds on her hands and forearms. She struggled with her assailant. She had to know that she was dying at the hands of her killer.
The autopsy report also provides a detail crucial to the investigation.
Based upon his finding of a stomach full of completely undigested spaghetti, the medical examiner estimated the time of death as 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Cindy and Robert had shared a meal of spaghetti between 12 and 1 o'clock. Robert placed himself in that home alone in his wife's company at the estimated time of death.
It really made Bob Borton our prime suspect. He was the husband that last saw her alive. He was the husband that was the first to find her dead on the kitchen floor. He and his wife had had difficulties throughout their marriage, had had problems.
Investigators decided that it was important to keep working on Robert. He was really their only feasible suspect.
Based on the findings of the autopsy report and mounting circumstantial evidence, Robert is called back in for another interview.
One of our agents was very aggressive in interrogating Bob Borton about his wife's murder and accusing him of being the murderer. And Bob, again, sat very calm and still and was not irate about being accused of having taken his wife's life. The investigators decided to give me a call and ask me to conduct a polygraph examination of Bob Borton and do that right away before he had a chance to think twice about it. The relevant questions that I asked Bob Borton is, were you responsible for your wife's death? Did you cause your wife's death? Did you stab your wife? He was just very humdrum, very relaxed, and very, well, I guess, you'll have to do what you have to do because I didn't do it.
The polygraph results tell a different story.
He failed the polygraph. The results were that he was lying and that he was culpable in this crime. So investigators were, in fact, increasingly convinced that Robert had killed his wife.
One week after the gruesome murder of Cindy Borton, her husband Robert, the prime suspect in her murder, has just failed a polygraph.
When I did see those results, the thing that next happens is for me to go in and interrogate him and try to determine why he was being deceptive. I needed to try to get a confession from him. When I confronted him with the results of the polygraph examination, he didn't shake his head no that he didn't do it. He didn't try to respond to me in any way, shape, or form. He just basically sat in a chair and didn't move. The only thing I want him to say is, I did it. And so we were very aggressive in interrogating Bob Borton about his wife's murder.
Robert Borton never wavered in his denial that he was responsible for this.
Robert's behavior under questioning becomes even more unusual.
He did, in fact, fall asleep in the chair. The only time that anybody has ever fallen asleep in the middle of one of my interrogations. Bob Borton's reactions were not what we would have considered to be normal.
Despite failing the polygraph, the evidence against Robert is purely circumstantial, so detectives have no choice but to let him go.
At that point in time, we're thinking we must have missed something. There must be something more involved that we're not aware of.
The lack of an arrest unsettles the town further.
The people of the community really are concerned when there is an immediate suspect, why that person's not apprehended and taken to jail. But we need more information. We need more evidence.
The members of the community were increasingly convinced that Robert had killed his wife. They expressed those concerns. They brought a great deal of pressure on the chief of police.
The public was just as anxious to get it solved as the police was. We wanted to get this case cleared up so gossip and things would die down after, of course, this happened. He wasn't preaching for a while, and then people just quit attending.
There was a real change my father noticed. People who were open and friendly with him, all of a sudden, they quite often would go as far as to cross the street so that they would not have to walk near him, would not have to speak with him. I did my best to at least attempt to continue my life as well as I could.
Laying Cindy to rest is tough on the young teen.
The only time I can remember my mother having a brand new dress was the one bought for her to bury her in. It's the only brand new dress I ever recall her having.
2 months after Cindy's murder, Robert and John leave Shenandoah.
It was unbearable for my father to continue to live there. People who he thought had been friends before had shut him out.
He moved to a town 3 hours away, and we watched his movements, where he went, who he was meeting with.
The police were really struggling because they had nothing. They had no one else.
2.5 months later, when the state crime lab sends investigators the results of the fingerprint analysis, they hope it'll be the crucial evidence for which they've been waiting.
Robert's fingerprints were not found on any of the murder weapons or the phone. This, frankly, was frustrating to some of the investigators involved in the case. It was solid evidence that someone other than Robert Borton was very possibly the guilty party in this murder.
The news is a huge blow to the investigation.
It's concerning whenever cases are not immediately solvable, and as time passes, the prospects for solving them become smaller and smaller.
We just waited for authorities to make an arrest. And when they didn't make an arrest in the months that were going by, that's when we started to realize this is somebody that they don't know who it is.
3 months after the murder, as detectives redouble their efforts to unearth new suspects, another crime in Shenandoah comes to their attention.
In the weeks preceding and following the murder of Cindy Borton, there were arsons in the town of Shenandoah. Even though arson is a different crime than murder, it's a violent crime. And when one has a series of violent crimes, in this case, the arsons and the murder, all occurring within a matter of weeks, it would be only normal to at least examine the possibility of a connection between the two.
On November 30th, another arson occurs, and a clue found at the scene leaves investigators stunned.
The arsonist left a note referring to the 2 prior arsons and Cynthia Borton, and in fact threatened more violence in that community, saying that the arsons and Cindy Borton ain't nothing compared to what's coming.
Oh my gosh, this story just got even more crazy and more sensational and more scary.
Detectives hunting the killer of Cindy Borton have just received a mysterious clue linking her murder to a series of arson fires across town.
There was a note that was, in fact, very intriguing, and the note referred to all 3 arsons and Cindy Borton, obviously raising the possibility that the perpetrator of the arsons was also the perpetrator of the Cindy Borton murder. The note in question was signed the Night Stalker, NS, which copied the name of a highly publicized murderer in California.
At the time, the Night Stalker had already been arrested, so this was clearly a copycat killer.
It was rather apparent that the perpetrator was someone who used that name out of convenience and imitation.
He was calling himself the Night Stalker. Wow, he's just crazy.
There were a great many different and wild rumors, leaving notes at the scene and hints such as the NS Night Stalker were quite possibly a cry for attention. This would have to be investigated. The note was examined for fingerprints, and indeed some latent fingerprint ridge detail was found on the note.
The prints are sent to the crime lab for analysis.
It was important not only to continue investigating the murder, but also to investigate the arsons for purpose of developing a suspect on the murder. There had been 3 arsons in the community. One had been at the Broad Street School. The letters NS were found slashed on a bridge near the Broad Street School fire.
There was another fire set in a school teacher's pickup, and there was a note, "The Night Stalker strikes again."
This case was a genuine whodunit. Even though we had the Night Stalker note, investigators didn't know who had authored it or who had committed the arsons.
I never really would have expected this case to go where it went. You know, it wasn't something that we expected from the beginning at all.
Several days later, detectives get the fingerprint results from the note, and they don't match back to anyone in their database.
There was, in fact, a killer at loose in their community.
As every week went by, and then the months, we kept wondering, why is it so hard to capture a murderer in this small town who committed a murder in such a shocking, unbelievable manner?
On January 31st, 1989, police finally get a break in the case.
5 months after this murder, a young man named Jackson, a high school student, came into the police department and informed authorities that the previous day he'd had a visit from a friend, another teenager, and that in the course of their afternoon visiting with each other, this friend had told him that he had some very shocking information and something that was bothering him. More specifically, that he had murdered Cynthia Borton. This information was a shock that shed an entirely new light on the investigation.
When Jackson came into the Shenandoah Police Department, yes, that definitely was a big break. His friend had told him things that happened at the crime scene that only the killer would know.
Jackson's friend described the murder that he had committed and even went so far as to draw a small diagram indicating exactly where the body had been left in the house. Jackson shared this drawing as well with the authorities, which was important and surprising because it appeared quite accurate.
He told Jackson, "I'm going to show you where the knife is." And he did that. And that's when Jackson realized, oh, he's really done this. And later that day, even though he was sworn to secrecy, he thought about his own mom and how the killer had been a guest in their house. And he thought, wow, that could have been my mom. So it wasn't hard for him to go to the police after that.
At this point, investigators were aware that Jackson had indeed very likely spoken to Cindy Borton's murderer.
Jackson said that James Bettis was the one responsible for killing Cynthia Borton.
Jim Bettis was a close friend of John Borton. They were classmates until Jimmy dropped out of high school. He was close enough to John and interacted with the Bortons so much that Cindy was very involved in Jim's life. He even thought of Cindy as a second mother to him. She tried to help him, tried to persuade him to return to school and get an education. She was a very good friend and mother figure to the young man. Jim was certainly not a suspect up to this point, but his statement to Jackson rang true.
It was amazement at that point in time because we talked to James Bettis previously. James Bettis became the prime suspect because of his admissions to his friend, but we need more corroboration. Jim was taken to the Shenandoah Police Department and he was interviewed. Jim did confess to the arsons, as a matter of fact, but denied ever having said anything to Jackson about Cynthia Borton's murder or having any involvement in Cynthia Borton's murder.
Jim agrees to have his fingerprints collected. He's also willing to undergo a polygraph.
During the polygraph examination, the questions I was asked were, was he involved in the death of Cynthia Borton, specifically whether he was the one that committed the crime.
Jimmy Bettis insisted throughout that he did not kill Cindy Borton.
When I quantified the polygraph examinations and I actually gave a numerical figure to each of his reactions, if they're over a -6, that strongly indicates to us that he's deceptive. James Bettis came up a -23. So there is absolutely no question he was the one involved in Cynthia Borton's murder.
It was a big shock, and it really left us, and I think everyone, scratching their head. Wow, we didn't see that coming.
Five months after the horrific slaying of Cindy Borton, detectives get their biggest break when her son's friend fails a polygraph.
Jim Bettis's polygraph, according to Agent McCleary, showed deception on his denial that he had murdered Cindy Borton.
It was very unusual that all of a sudden this person would become a suspect who was a teenager, and also he was good friends with Cynthia's son. And he had been in Cynthia's house many occasions.
Investigators confront Jim with the results.
The very next thing I said was, we all know exactly what happened on September 6th. You were the one responsible for having killed Cynthia Borton. There's no question in anybody's mind now. And he came out and said, I did it. Okay, I did it.
Jim Bettis had not been on our radar at all. We never dreamed that he might be capable of something like this.
James Bettis told me that on September 6th of 1988, he was walking around town, he was thinking about his father. He was thinking about how he hated his father.
His dad was always telling him that he was no good, he wasn't going to amount to anything. It was terrible. He hated his dad.
He needed to be able to get that rage out. And how he was going to do that was by seeing if he could actually kill.
His statement was that he wanted to kill his father, but that he knew he couldn't get that job done, and so he killed someone who was far more vulnerable, and that Cynthia Borton was a victim of convenience.
Police believe Jim showed up at the Borton household, just narrowly missing Robert, who had gone back to work after lunch.
Cynthia Borton answered the door and allowed him to come in because he had been there many times previously.
During his confession, Jimmy Bettis indicated that he had asked Cindy for a glass of water, which led her to walk into the kitchen. He followed her there, approaching her from behind, and grabbing a knife, immediately slashed her throat from behind. He stated he had used a pocket knife of his own in addition to Cynthia Borton's kitchen utensils. And that after the crime, he took his pocket knife, stained with Cindy Borton's blood, and threw it under a bridge. This was important information. It would corroborate his confession if in fact that knife could be found, and if in fact it had Cindy Borton's blood on it. Investigators scoured the area, found the knife where Jimmy Bettis described that they would find it, and when it was tested at the laboratory, indeed it had not only Cindy Borton's blood, but also Jimmy Bettis's fingerprint.
On February 2nd, 1989, detectives charge 18-year-old Jim Bettis with first-degree murder and 3 counts of arson.
The investigator told me that Jim had been arrested and he had confessed repeatedly. My first response was, no, he did not do this. He was my best friend. He was the first person that I trusted that was not an actual blood relative. It occurred to me that in at least some way I am responsible for this because I am the reason that he came into my house, that he was accepted into my house, and my mother is gone. There is nothing I can do to get her back.
At trial, Jim is convicted, and on November 13th, 1989, he's sentenced to life in prison.
Jimmy Bettis was a very troubled and angry and rage-filled young man. Had this crime not been solved when it was, there's every reason to be concerned that there would have been more fires, if not more murders.
My best friend committed this heinous crime of murder against somebody who trusted him, supported him, and cared for him. He frequently told me that we were brothers forever, and I honestly felt the same thing for him. And then for him to turn around and do such a horrific action, there is a bit of relief knowing that he will never be out again for the rest of his life. I want as many people as possible to know and understand what a wonderful, wonderful person my mother was, which is why I share her with as many people as I possibly can. I only miss her on days that end in Y. I am still waiting for my pain to go away. I don't know that it ever will.
A beloved father and devoted basketball coach.
Jimmy loved kids.
He loved to talk about coaching basketball and God.
Ruthlessly gunned down in his own home.
There were 10 shell casings. Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Leaving a whole community devastated.
I just started screaming. I literally just lost it.
Detectives follow evidence down a twisted trail.
It was what we call a whodunit. All the doors were locked to some fashion.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area.
To uncover a number of suspects.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
He had just filed for divorce before he was killed.
Was there some sort of romantic thing gone awry?
And unveil a killer no one could have ever imagined.
They had no remorse, no confessions.
You saying that you killed him?
It shocked me very, very much. This could happen to anybody.
Cordova is a peaceful suburb just east of Memphis, Tennessee. Its wide open spaces and strong church communities make it a haven for families.
Cordova is one of those very safe neighborhoods. Kids riding up and down to the bikes. You honk at your neighbor and your neighbor waves.
It's not a place that we're accustomed to seeing violent crimes.
But in the winter of 2013, the town's carefree spirit is disrupted by a troubled call to police.
The initial call came on a Friday morning from the principal at Ridgeway High School.
Jimmy McLean had not reported to work. He was a school teacher and a basketball coach.
Jimmy was always punctual, so when he didn't show up for work, people immediately started worrying about Jimmy.
Our patrol officers go over there and they knocked on the door, nothing. The front door was locked, the back door was locked, the garage door was shut, all the windows were locked. Nothing appeared to be opened or broke. And then one officer was able to look in through some glass doors. And then he saw something that looked like a shell casing.
Immediately on alert, officers quickly force entry into the home.
As soon as they made entry, they saw a black male on the floor with a lot of blood around him. Dead.
Homicide investigators are on the scene within minutes.
When I first arrived, we see a male victim laying in the den area of the house who appeared to have been shot multiple times.
Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Detectives find a wallet in the victim's pocket. The ID inside confirms this is 49-year-old Jimmy McClain.
The big thing that stood out at that time was the numerous shell casings that were scattered throughout the living portion of the residence.
There were 10 shell casings, and they were all the same caliber, 40 caliber, but they were two different brands. That puts a theory in your head. Was there two shooters, you know, one brand in one gun, one brand in the other? Or was it just one shooter with mixed rounds?
Detectives can find no murder weapon at the scene, but something else grabs their attention.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area, which we knew were not any of our officers' prints.
We were able to lift those prints.
I truly was hoping we could identify the type of shoe and the actual size of the shoe.
There were no signs of fingerprints to the naked eye, so we were able to swab the doorknobs, both interior and exterior on the front door, for the presence of DNA.
An exhaustive search of the house yields no sign of forced entry.
We had no signs of robbery, no signs of burglary. The big thing to me was all the doors were locked to some fashion, meaning someone locked the door on their way out upon leaving the scene. That told me that most likely our suspect had a key to the residence.
So once we realized that somebody had let themselves in, we're like, well, who's got access to these keys? Did Jimmy know the person who did this?
Detectives also attempt to discover the approximate time the murder happened.
We were able to find out there was a shots fired call that came in our dispatch around 8:50 p.m. 2 days before we found the body.
So started making sense real quick, though, that that's probably when this happened.
As police continue their investigation at the scene, Jimmy's sister, Easter, arrives.
To this day, that is the absolute worst day of my life. It's the day I came around the corner and saw yellow tape around my baby brother's house, who I love so dearly. The police asked me, "Ma'am, do you know who lives here?" I said, "My brother is my brother. Where's my brother?"
Officers confirm Easter's worst fears and tell her that her brother has been killed.
I just started screaming, just howling.
Detectives ask Easter and Jimmy's mother, Jamela, to come downtown. Through her tears, Easter tells detectives how young Jimmy grew up to be such a beloved figure.
We grew up in Eastern Arkansas. Jimmy is the fourth of 8 kids. He was intelligent, precocious, very athletic.
From a young age, Jimmy McClain had a passion for basketball.
Jimmy walked tall, slender, like a greyhound. His real tight muscle. flexible, agile.
His nickname was Full Time because he never played half speed. He always played full speed, and that's how he took life.
Jimmy had played basketball with Scottie Pippen. Jimmy considered Scottie Pippen a friend, and I think it was likewise.
After 7 years of professional basketball, Jimmy took up coaching.
Jimmy loved teaching and mentoring. He just was a natural leader with youth.
Jimmy had found his calling, but one part of his life remained unfulfilled.
The thing that he talked to me the most about was his desire to be married.
In the late 1990s, Jimmy met the partner he'd always dreamed of. Her name was Carla.
He was very happy, very excited. He took his relationship very seriously. The next summer, they got married.
Jimmy also became a father to Carla's 2 children from a previous relationship, 16-year-old Tiffany and 11-year-old Dwayne.
He never had children, so he was looking forward to being a father. They all looked up to him as a mentor and as a father, and he spent a lot of time trying to be sure that they were on a good path. He talked to me a lot about the things he was going to do with Dwayne and Tiffany, and he especially wanted to involve Dwayne in summer basketball camps and so forth. He was very serious about being a good husband and a good father.
Together with Carla, Jimmy raised Dwayne and Tiffany as his own. But after 8 years of marriage, cracks started to show in their relationship.
Carla wanted the divorce at first. I do believe that the problems were related to something that occurred early on in their relationship.
Initially, Jimmy had resisted the idea.
I overheard Jimmy telling her that it doesn't make sense for us to be separated. There's nothing wrong, we're not having problems.
But eventually, Carla and Jimmy split up, and after 4 years of separation, Jimmy finally agreed to make it official.
I don't think I really got the full story about exactly what changed his mind and his heart toward her. But he had just filed for divorce a couple of weeks before he was killed.
Detectives are suspicious. Was the timing just a coincidence? Or did Jimmy's looming divorce have something to do with his murder?
We immediately thought we needed to talk to Carla.
Had Jimmy and Carla been in some sort of argument or confrontation?
Coming up, detectives unearth disturbing clues.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Why are these numbers erased during the same time period as the homicide?
And the truth blindsides everyone.
We had found a needle in the haystack.
They had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Police have just learned that Jimmy McClain filed for divorce 2 weeks before he was killed. And now detectives need to know if animosity between Jimmy and his soon-to-be ex-wife Carla could have been a motive for murder.
We had asked, Carla and Tiffany and Dwayne, her biological children, to come town.
Dwayne and Tiffany wait in the next room while police talk to Carla, starting with her relationship with Jimmy.
She says, look, we were going through a divorce, but it wasn't because he was doing anything bad. She said that we fell out of love.
Carla tells police that when she and Jimmy were married in 2001, Jimmy treated her kids, Dwayne and Tiffany, like they were his own. But as they grew into their late teens, Carla and Jimmy's parenting styles started to clash.
Carla did advise that Jimmy was really hard on her kids. Jimmy was very discipline-oriented, and she always took the side of the kids. In her eyes, they could do nothing wrong. She wasn't going to let Jimmy over-discipline. And some of the issues is what transformed into this growing away from each other.
Detectives ask Carla directly if she stands to gain from Jimmy's death.
She did advise that she had a life insurance policy through her work where Jimmy was on the policy and she would have been the beneficiary.
Was the life insurance payout a motive for Carla to kill Jimmy? Knowing evidence from the crime scene suggests the killer let themselves in. Detectives need to find out if Carla still had access to Jimmy's home.
We actually did ask Carla if she had a key to the house, and she did not have a key that she could remember.
Undeterred, they ask where Carla was on the night of the murder.
She didn't go out and do anything. She said it was raining that night. It was nasty weather. She actually went to her bedroom and read a book. We asked if anybody could verify that. She said, well, my son, Dwayne, because he was at home as well.
To confirm Carla's alibi, police bring in Dwayne and Tiffany, who are waiting in the next room.
When we saw Dwayne, he's a 19-year-old, kid. Dwayne gave a statement advising to us that, when his mom came home, that he just sat and chilled at the house. He didn't have a cell phone, so he would use his mom's. His mom said that she was down in his bedroom. He said he was up in his bedroom, and they didn't see each other the rest of the night.
Dwayne's account lines up with Carla's, but detectives are curious about whether Dwayne had any conflicts with Jimmy.
Tell me about Jimmy. How was y'all's relationship?
It was cool, but we bumped heads a little bit sometimes. He was straight up in the night. He was cool. He fun, loving person.
Dwayne just was like, I can't believe this happened. I don't know who would have done this.
Police turn their attention to his sister Tiffany, and right away sense some tension.
When we interviewed Tiffany, she admitted her and Jimmy butted heads on things, and she actually moved out. She didn't like being parented by him.
Detectives ask where she was at the time of the murder.
Advised she was at home with her boyfriend during the time frame all that Wednesday evening. So at the time we got through interviewing Carla, Tiffany, and Dwayne, there was not anything to lead us to believe that they had any involvement with the death of Jimmy.
To help confirm their alibis, detectives ask for Carla and Tiffany's cell phones.
We were going to use the technology of the cell phone pinging to corroborate where they were the night of the murder.
While they wait for those results, detectives canvass Jimmy's friends and colleagues to find out who else might have had a key to his house.
Early on in the investigation, we had to look at everything. With Jimmy being a high school teacher, with Jimmy being a basketball coach, there was multiple people that could have done this.
We had to start going back to who knew Jimmy. And the first thing we did was work. We spoke with all the teachers liked Jimmy, other coaches liked Jimmy, the principal liked Jimmy.
Detectives can find no one with a key or even a bad word to say about Jimmy.
He was the kindest, gentlest, most compassionate person that I know. But for somebody to snatch your loved one from you out of their own selfish reasons, it really is heartbreaking, and it makes you mad.
3 days into the investigation, detectives receive Jimmy's cell phone back from forensics and discover that he was texting shortly before he was killed.
He was texting with a female subject, and they were back and forth talking about some directions and basically good night. The last text we identified as a subject named Pam Smith.
The name is new to police, but when they compare the time of her last text with the report of gunshots on the night of the murder, they realize they were just minutes apart. With this new lead, Pam Smith becomes detectives' newest suspect. Who is she? And was she involved in Jimmy's murder?
When you read the text messages between her and Jimmy, the lingering question had to be, was there some sort of, romantic thing gone awry?
Detectives have just discovered that Jimmy McClain was texting with a woman named Pam Smith on the night he was murdered.
We were able to determine that Pam was the last person that Jimmy had contacted.
Investigators need to speak to Pam to see if she has any information that points to the killer.
We called just to say, this is the sheriff's office. Do you know Jimmy? And she was like, yeah, that's my boyfriend.
Detectives inform Pam of Jimmy's murder and carefully gauge her response.
She was extremely distraught. She was like, do I need to come down there? What do I need to do? We still had to figure out who she was. Is she married? Is there an affair situation? Is this a boyfriend, girlfriend situation?
Pam tells detectives that she and Jimmy had only been dating for 6 months.
We were able to sort of dig into the relationship between Pam and Jimmy. What seemed like a healthy relationship.
Pamela claims she was 3 hours away in Nashville at the time of the murder, and she's more than happy to turn over her phone so police can verify her statement.
After talking to her, there was nothing that she gave any kind of suspicion or anything.
Detectives have one more question for Pamela.
We actually did ask Pam if she had a key to the house, and she advised that she did not have a key.
But she says she knows who does.
Pam had overheard a phone call. Jimmy was telling his wife, Carla, that she could come by the house while he was gone to pick up some mail that had come to the house for her. Pam took note that when they left the house, Jimmy didn't leave the mail in the mailbox or on the front door, but he left it inside the house, which told Pam that Carla had a key to the house.
Police believe the killer had a key, but Carla told detectives she didn't have one. The discrepancy raises a red flag.
Is it possible that Carla had a key to the house? How can we prove that she didn't come into the house the night of the murder?
There's only one way to know for sure.
We used the technology of the cell phone pinging to follow her from her work all the way to home.
The cell phone data indicates Carla was home all night, and her daughter Tiffany was too.
Everybody's statements made sense where they were. There was no reason to pursue any other questions with them or Pam at that moment.
Before Carla and Tiffany can be completely ruled out, police must corroborate the calls and texts on their phones with the complete records from the cell companies.
And those can take several days, depending on the circumstance.
A week after the murder, Jimmy's loved ones pay their respects at his funeral.
Jimmy's funeral was held at a local Church of Christ, probably a couple thousand people there. Jimmy touched a lot of people.
Going to Jimmy's funeral was a tough process for myself. So many people loved him.
The mystery of who could have killed Jimmy is on everyone's mind, and grief-stricken loved ones are desperate for answers.
The family was very concerned, but I felt that absolutely the truth would come out.
It was hard waiting and hoping that they get that person before it's too late.
It's very frustrating. After several days, it gets worse. It gets harder to solve, and the family starts to lose hope in you.
The day after the funeral, detectives received the forensics reports.
There was no extra DNA under the fingernails of him to see if he got physically close enough to maybe grab the suspect or anything like that. We didn't get any fingerprints that weren't supposed to be there. Jimmy's prints were the only ones there.
The report isn't all bad news for detectives.
An expert at Nike was able to determine the muddy shoe prints in the entryway of the house. Most likely came from a Nike Air Force One.
These are basketball type shoes. They're between the size 10 and 11.
Before detectives can follow up on this new lead, their investigation takes a bizarre twist.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Ridgeway High School had a very good basketball team. They were one of the top in the state. We started hearing about a student at the school who had just recently gotten in some trouble.
Detectives need to know if the scandal is linked to Jimmy's murder. Staff tells them the player at the center of the storm is number 22, Mackenzie Sewell.
Obviously, he was a fairly good basketball player, but he was also 2 years older than people that he was playing with. He was actually an adult, falsified documents to still play high school basketball because he was attempting to try to get a scholarship to play.
A week after Jimmy is found dead, the scandal explodes into the headlines.
This man used a fake transcript to enroll here at Ridgeway High, and our sources tell us the man has a GED, but enrolled here simply so he could play basketball.
A humiliated Mackenzie is kicked off the team and out of Ridgeway High.
The dream of the NBA is over. The coaches were like, oh my goodness, because the whole school gets punished for it. They get disqualified from being able to play.
The scandal raises a key question for detectives. Had Jimmy discovered the truth about Mackenzie and been silenced before he could report him to authorities?
Did Jimmy initiate this whole situation? Because we knew Jimmy was an ethical individual. If Mackenzie thought Jimmy had anything to do with this, then this could be a reason why Jimmy was murdered.
Police are eager to talk to Mackenzie, but that's not going to happen.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
Detectives try a different approach. They go to speak with the person who registered him at Ridgeway High, his mother, Chandra Nicole. What she tells them is more bizarre than they could have imagined.
What we found out is that was his wife.
Detectives hunting the killer of high school basketball coach Jimmy McClain are investigating whether a scandal involving one of his players is linked to his death. Now they discovered that the player's mother is actually his wife. She admits to helping Mackenzie falsify his age, but says it wasn't Jimmy who had discovered the deception.
She had actually called in to say that he was falsifying records, that he wasn't supposed to be in the school because they had gotten into an argument.
While enjoying his second go-around in high school, Mackenzie began a relationship with a fellow student. When his wife caught wind of it, she told the school about Mackenzie's scam.
It was a domestic situation between him and the wife. It really didn't have anything to do with Jimmy. Didn't fall on Jimmy at all.
Once again, a promising lead evaporates into thin air, and over a week into the investigation, police are starting over.
I was back to square one again. I was starting to question myself and wonder, are we gonna get anywhere with this thing?
I was starting to be concerned. I wanted to know when people were gonna be charged.
Just as investigators begin to fear the trail growing cold, they receive the complete cell phone records for Jimmy's ex-wife, Carla, and her daughter, Tiffany.
We had ordered direct cell phone records to corroborate the exact records that we had initially dumped. You're talking hundreds, even thousands of records at times to look through, to see if you can find where there's a discrepancy in something.
After days of hard work, police get the break they've been praying for.
Everybody else's phones were making sense, but Carla's phone did not make sense. We noticed there were actually people being texted between 6 and 9, 2 different phone numbers. And that was the time frame of the homicide. Those texts were conveniently erased off Carla's phone. So that automatically piqued interest. So we're trying to identify the 2 phone numbers that were deleted. And we identified one of them as a subject named Robert, and then another subject named Heather. We looked up Robert real quick and found out Robert was a convicted felon for dope dealing. But why are these numbers erased the night of the murder? At that point, I felt it necessary to call Carla back in and talk to her again, and then further identify maybe Heather and Robert since we had names on them.
When detectives press Carla about the texts, she tells them they belong to her son and Jimmy's former stepson, Dwayne. Detectives already know that Dwayne uses his mom's phone since he doesn't own one of his own.
Carla said that Heather was a girlfriend. She says, oh, she's a good girl. She's a girl that lives out in Cordova, not too far. Carla said wasn't too fond of Robert, but she did admit he and Dwayne, they were friends. She says, well, I don't really like him hanging out with Robert too much. You know, he's a troublemaker.
Knowing that Dwayne was texting with a known felon during the time frame of Jimmy's murder is a red flag for detectives. So they asked Dwayne to join his mom down at the station.
The way we approached Dwayne was like, hey, we're having to kind of start over and get a more detailed events of the night. And he advised when his mom got home, he had the phone, he spoke with one of his friends, and then Heather came over.
When detectives finish with Carla and Dwayne, they quickly contact Heather to see if she can confirm Dwayne's story.
She said, I went to Dwayne's house that evening, later that evening. So she has confirmed that she went over there.
It seems like it's another dead end. Yet when detectives follow up with a question about the basketball shoe print found at the crime scene, the interview takes a promising turn.
We asked about the shoes, and she said, oh, Dwayne has these Air Force Ones, and he wears a size 10.5, which fit the crime scene. And at that point, she said, and I remember seeing those Air Force Ones out on the porch, but I hadn't seen them since then. She said, I even have a picture of them. And when she showed a picture, it was a picture of Dwayne staying in the kitchen with a AR-15 rifle and these Air Force Ones.
Police quickly get a search warrant for Carla's home.
Searching the closets and everything else, so there's no Air Force Ones in there. There's no shoes that match the homicide. Took pictures of his room, and we left. We didn't come out at that house with anything.
So far, linking Dwayne to the crime has not proven fruitful, but detectives have another strategy.
We know for a fact that there was text messages between Robert and Dwayne during the homicide. We feel that those texts could be very important. Since he'd erased them off his phone, we couldn't get them. So my goal was to get a search warrant for Robert's phone, hoping that the text messages were still on his phone, visible where we could see them.
While police wait for a warrant to be approved, officers keep an eye on Robert.
I arrived, and within a few hours of setting up surveillance, Robert Collins came out of his house.
At that point, our detectives went to talk to him, and Robert took off running.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain believe text on the phone of convicted felon Robert Collins may point to the killer.
When Robert took off running, he ran a good ways, but we needed to catch him. We didn't want him to destroy his phone or anything like that.
As Robert Collins was running away from the scene, he tossed something.
Our detectives ended up catching him on foot, and when they did, he had a large amount of narcotics.
The illegal drugs give detectives reason to arrest Robert. But even more incriminating is what he tried to discard as he fled.
When we saw that he had tossed a weapon, we immediately thought maybe that was the weapon that was involved.
So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Are we gonna solve the homicide right now? You get excited, like, hey, we're there, we're gonna get this.
Police bring Robert down to the station, but before they question him, they carefully examine his gun and phone.
I think it was very quickly determined it wasn't the weapon from the scene.
Still, detectives have plenty of leverage on Robert.
He's a felon convicted with a handgun. Now he's got another handgun on him and a large amount of drugs. This could easily go federal. Maybe that could help us out. Maybe he'd want to work something out. He wouldn't budge on anything. I don't want to talk to y'all. Basically, he said, just put me in a jail cell. I'll go do my time. You just don't get that. That's just not normal.
Is Robert trying to protect his buddy, Dwayne, or just himself? If he won't give anything up, detectives hope his cell phone might.
I was hoping that the text messages were still on his phone. Started going through it. Well, Robert had erased his text too. But what Robert didn't erase were some pictures that we were able to get. The day before the homicide, Robert on his phone had a picture of a handgun. It is a similar gun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Sigma, the same caliber used. What was unique about the handgun was not the handgun itself, but where the handgun was laying. And it was laying on a very unique bedspread. When I saw the bedspread, I was like, I've seen that bedspread before. I said, go get the search warrant pictures from when we picked Dwayne up. Well, as we scrolled through more pictures, we finally found a deleted picture that had Dwayne in front of the bedspread. So it tied it all in with the gun and the picture.
Police now know the gun likely belonged to Dwayne or someone in his inner circle. But who used it to gun Jimmy down in cold blood? Detectives hope to find out from Robert himself.
So when we put Robert in jail, we were hoping Robert would say something on the phone. The first phone call that Robert made was to a young guy. First thing that Robert said to the guy was, hey man, that pit bull, it's real sick. And the guy kind of like, I don't think he caught what he was saying. He's like, oh yeah, just laughing, I got you. And Robert, you could see, was very frustrated. Like, no man, I'm not kidding. You need to get rid of that pit bull, it's sick. Bro, I shouldn't have sold it to you. We did have indication that pit bull was most likely the gun.
And real sick, put it in street terms, means it has a body on it.
Detectives trace the owner of the phone Robert called.
It was a kid named Jamarius that lived in the Cordova area.
We believe that Jamarius Cooper had in his possession the firearm that was used in the killing of Jimmy McClain.
Police get an emergency search warrant and race over to Jamarius' home before he can dispose of the gun.
When we got Jamarius Cooper's bedroom, we systematically started going through places that things could be hidden.
We were going through it and we weren't finding anything. And then one of my detectives, probably into the 30th box or so, he's like, I got something. And I was like, do what?
When I saw that gun, I immediately felt like we had found the needle in the haystack. We had known through this investigation that most likely we were looking for a very specific gun. That is the same style gun that we're looking for. Same caliber, most likely the same brand, the same model.
At that moment, I was like, Jimmy's here, he's guiding us. He's telling us it's all here. He's not making it easy. He's making this puzzle, but it's slowly coming together. So immediately took the gun and had TBI process it. Within a couple hours, they were calling us back on, hey, this is the gun that was used in the homicide of Jimmy McClain. That does bring some emotion to you. You're like, oh my gosh, this work, this time, and we're going into 30 days here. I mean, nobody finds a gun used in a homicide in 30 days.
Police need to talk to Jamarius. But before they can track him down, they get an alarming call.
We have a call from Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, and the deputy there said, "Hey, listen, we just had something weird come in. A white female came running into our station. She was very distraught. She was in her pajamas, and that she said that she wanted to pass on some information that her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach."
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain have just received an unexpected call from a sheriff's office 5 hours away.
And the deputy there said, "A white female came running into our station. Her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach." Her husband was Carla's brother, which was Dwayne's uncle.
Detectives are stunned. Dwayne's uncle is Donald Page, a known felon. Detectives bring him in, knowing they may only have one shot to get him to talk.
He was very, "I'm not talking to y'all, I ain't got nothing to say."
Police remind him of one simple fact. If he's withholding information, that makes him an accessory to murder.
And all of a sudden, he said, "Look, my nephew said he did it."
Dwayne had, in fact, taken him aside and said, "Uncle, I had to handle my business." And Donald said he looked at him and said, "Are you saying that you killed him?" Dwayne said to him, "I had to stand up for my mom."
Dwayne, he loved his mom. They were having some financial issues, and Dwayne thought that if this divorce could just be done with, I could get the money from the house. And I think Dwayne took it upon himself to do whatever he wanted to do, and which unfortunately led to the homicide.
There was tension between Jimmy and Dwayne already. So there was that divorce, money, financial implication, motive.
With an accessory charge hanging over his head, Donald agrees to testify against his nephew.
At that point, I called the prosecutor and told him what we had, and he said, "I think it's time to go lock up Dwayne Moore for homicide."
On March 26, 2013, Dwayne Moore is charged with the murder of his own stepfather.
I'm telling you, he just had no remorse, no confessions. He just didn't have any care in the world whatsoever.
When I heard Dwayne had been charged with Jimmy's murder, I felt a lot of relief.
I was shocked to know that someone that he had influenced this long in this young man's life that would take his life.
It went deep to my core as far as emotionally. This was unbelievable because of who Jimmy was.
14 months later, Dwayne Moore stands before the Memphis judge and jury. The prosecution lays out what they believe happened the night of the murder.
Dwayne had it in his head that he was going over there to kill him. He knew that there was a key to the house that Carla might have forgot about. I think he waited until he saw Jimmy pull in, let himself in that front door. Pulled the gun out as soon as he saw Jimmy and started shooting. I think he did it in about 5 minutes at the most. I think he just went in there and started blasting away.
To try to imagine what Jimmy must have gone through in the final moments that he was living is extremely painful. The awful terror he must have felt, knowing that his life was about to end.
On June 27, 2014, Dwayne Moore is convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
It hurts. It hurts that somebody thought so little of my family, that they could take somebody so precious to us.
While Jimmy's family still misses him every day, his love for educating young people lives on.
To honor Jimmy's memory, we established a scholarship in his name at the University of Arkansas at Conway.
I think Jimmy would want to be remembered by being a godly man, a kind man, and a peaceful man.
That's what helps me to try to let the anger go. Don't be mad. Just thank God that he was here and that he was my brother for as long as he was. I miss him and I love him.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A brilliant, free-spirited college student.
Barbara was very creative. She was always very theatrical.
I always thought she was a genius because everything came so easy to her.
Is found brutally murdered in a mountain canyon.
We could see 5 or 6 gunshot wounds.
There was some speculations that she had been sexually assaulted.
A clue left by the victim leads to surprising suspects.
He finds this note addressed to all the Mormon roommates that she was leaving to go be with her people.
Just how bad was this relationship with her roommates, and what could it cause anyone to do?
And a series of bizarre twists.
He's telling us that bullet holes were in a triangular pattern, and that's a sign of a possible Satan killing.
Somebody took her up there into the woods. This was potentially a sacrifice.
Until the evidence reveals a killer no one saw coming.
There was DNA from the soil that was underneath her body.
It was like finding a needle in a haystack, a big haystack.
It just didn't seem like somebody who would kill somebody.
It was just the biggest shock you could fathom.
Provo, Utah, a small college town in a picture-perfect mountain setting.
Provo sits in a county south of Salt Lake. It's where the Brigham Young University campus is at.
It's a very safe community. During the 1970s, Provo was definitely a place that was very low on crime, and you didn't have to worry about locking your doors at night.
That innocence is lost on a cold March afternoon in 1974. When a grisly discovery in a nearby canyon sends shockwaves through the community.
On March 11th, 1974, the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office received a telephone call from a power company worker who started walking up from the power plant. And as he was cutting through some brush, he came across a white female with gunshot wounds to her back.
The crime scene is essentially a couple miles up what we call Big Cottonwood Canyon.
Investigators race to the canyon where the utility worker leads them to the body.
We could see 5 or 6 gunshot wounds. All of them looked to be in her back or in her arm. The shot placements looked like execution type shots, and it looked like she had been there for a few hours at least. With the way that her body was positioned, we felt like sexual assault was part of this crime scene. Her arms were tucked up underneath her. That told us that she was in pain, that she was fearful of what was happening to her. We're looking for things like drag marks, but the ground around The body was not disturbed.
It looks like where she was is where she was killed.
Detectives are struck by an unusual detail.
Her clothes were folded neatly and piled towards the top of her head.
We suspected that the victim was probably trying to buy some time. As she was being told to undress, she was stacking her clothes in this neat pile.
More evidence is revealed when they turn the victim over.
We found some possibly .38 caliber bullets that were recovered after they had gone through the victim's body. We also picked up some soil and logged it into our evidence room.
The detectives back in the 70s, they didn't have the DNA that we have in today's crime scene investigations. They focused on all kinds of trace evidence like the soil, fibers, hairs may link the suspect to that scene.
While the body is taken to the morgue, detectives interview their only witness.
The only thing we really knew at this point was a utility worker had found this body, and we were able to clear him fairly quickly, but we didn't know who the victim was. We didn't have any other real suspects to go with at that point. We got a hold of the local media, let them know that we had a white female, Jane Doe, that we were trying to identify. Later that night, we received a telephone call from the Brigham Young University Police Department that they had received a missing person report of a white female earlier that day. The missing person in Provo matched the description of our Jane Doe.
The missing person is 22-year-old student Barbara Jean Rocky, but police need a formal identification to be sure she's also their murder victim.
We made a phone call down to a couple of the guys that were hanging out with Barbara.
Jerry Hicker is the one that filed the missing persons report. Jerry is also a student at BYU, and he was a friend of Barbara's and some of her roommates.
Edward Fisher and Jerry Hicker went to the morgue to do an identification on our Jane Doe.
Edward and Jerry confirm the murdered woman is Barbara Rocky. Police now face the difficult task of informing her family.
At the time of Barbara's murder, my parents were living in California.
My mom found out first from the police and was crying, and from then on, nothing was the same.
It was just the biggest shock you could fathom. It's like what you knew of the world has just imploded.
Born in 1952, Barbara had an idyllic childhood growing up in Menlo Park, California.
Barbara was very creative. She was always very theatrical.
I always thought she was a genius because languages and music came so easy to her. Barbara was always rooting for the underdog. If somebody needed help, she would open doors for them. I mean, always doing something very sweet.
When the time came to go to college, Barbara's choice reflected a growing spiritual interest.
Barbara was always searching for a religion.
Barbara was interested in the Mormon religion. My parents were very happy for her to go to Brigham Young because they felt that she would get the safe group of friends and the good education and religion that she required.
When Barbara went off to college, she seemed up and happy and like things were going well.
Investigators asked Barbara's loved ones if they can think of anyone who might be responsible.
Since she was away at college and out of our supervision, we had no idea what she was doing. We just didn't know what kind of friends she was making.
In speaking with the family, they just had no idea on who could have done this to her.
With the family unable to provide leads, detectives hope her college friends might be able to point them in the right direction.
Ed Fisher was dating one of Barbara's roommates. When asked if he had any idea who would have done this to Barbara, he just had no idea. He felt Jerry Hicker might have more information about Barbara than he would.
Jerry Hicker is also a student at BYU, and Barbara seemed to spend lots of time with him.
Jerry described that he was just devastated that this had happened to Barbara. He knew Barbara very well.
Police asked Jerry what led him to file a missing persons report just hours before Barbara was found dead.
He said that he had gone skiing the day before, used Barbara's car to take the skis back, and then he met up with Barbara on March 11th at about 10 o'clock in the morning and gave the car keys back with plans to meet up later on to go grocery shopping. After leaving Barbara, Jerry spoke with one of Barbara's roommates, and then he went to study at the library. Later that day, Jerry and Barbara had plans to grab some food, but she didn't show up. As Jerry left the BYU campus, he walked past Barbara's house and he didn't see Barbara's car, so he continued towards his home. And as he was passing the Park Plaza apartments and sees Barbara's car sitting in the parking lot, which was someplace that Barbara would have never parked her car.
He said that was kind of odd, why it would have been parked where it's not normally parked.
Inside the car, he finds this note that was left by Barbara. It's addressed to all the roommates that basically said that she had found her people, that she was leaving to go be with her people. I think that he looked at it as a suicide note, and so he took the note over to the roommates, and that raised enough suspicion to report her as a missing person.
In order to clear Jerry as a person of interest, detectives drilled deeper into his timeline.
Jerry gave his timeline up until that evening, and essentially once he found that letter, he came and talked to us.
Jerry reported her missing, he found the note, he was cooperating with detectives, so he really wasn't somebody that fit as a suspect.
When detectives asked Jerry about any conflicts Barbara may have had, he mentions one unexpected source.
Jerry tells investigators that the roommates and Barbara kind of have an off-again, on-again relationship.
Barbara Jean Rocky lived with 7 other women from Mormon families. Barbara sometimes liked to do things for shock value, and this is not a place people go to shock others.
There was a little bit of intimidation between Barbara and some of the girls. Jerry said that things had gotten so bad that he had tried to find Barbara another place to live.
Was it possible one of Barbara's roommates could be the culprit behind her death?
Just how bad was this relationship that Barbara Jean Rocky had with her roommates, and what could it cause anyone to do?
Coming up, detectives uncover dark secrets.
The majority of the roommates were very religious.
He had a relationship with Barbara Jean and had been dating one of her roommates.
A love triangle could easily turn deadly when there's jealousy involved.
He had pulled a dagger on her and said he was going to stab her.
And links to a terrifying killer.
She described him as a great warlock and maybe even a devil worshiper.
There's women all over the American West that are going missing and being discovered dead.
This guy turns out to be probably the most famous, notorious serial killer of all time.
Until the evidence reveals the horrific truth.
He was not who we suspected, and so to learn that he was responsible for killing her was very surprising.
After 22-year-old college student Barbara Rocky is found shot dead, police have discovered she had clashed with her roommates and bring them in separately for questioning.
The roommates had only known her since January when Barbara moved into the house, and going to a predominantly Mormon school, Barbara really didn't fit that mold. She was from California and she was more of a free spirit.
She was somebody who was very opinionated and was not a conformist.
Barbara Jean Rocky's roommates say that she was kind of dating around, not necessarily saving herself from marriage, and it was generally not accepted.
The roommates were very religious. They attended church faithfully. I think Barbara would probably experiment with different religions just to expand her knowledge, and at times would do things that would maybe scare them.
Barbara Jean's roommate said she was kind of into witchcraft, so she was attracted to that lifestyle a little bit.
They didn't want to be a part of Barbara's life, so they would keep her at arm's length.
Had one of Barbara's roommates lashed out and done something unthinkable?
being more of the typical LDS BYU student. You just wouldn't think that somebody like that could kill somebody, but until you do the leather work on it, you can't clear them.
Detectives work to verify the roommates' alibis.
Once the investigators corroborated all the stories and looked at the timelines, they were able to clear the roommates as not being somebody that had killed Barbara.
As detectives continue asking the roommates about Barbara, they learn some startling new information.
Investigators found out through the interviews of the roommates that Barbara would carry a .357 revolver pistol. Some of the roommates described Barbara as being maybe a little bit paranoid, where she would think people were following her.
In 1974, people weren't just walking around with guns the way they do today. So if a 21-year-old college kid was walking around with a .357 Magnum pistol, who was she afraid of?
Detectives get more surprises when they search Barbara's vehicle.
When the investigators looked in the rear of the vehicle and they found ammunition and targets, things that you wouldn't expect in a female BYU student's car. Did Barbara feel like she needed to have a gun? Did she practice with the gun? Was somebody after her? We weren't sure what all of that meant at that point. The car was fingerprinted, but there was just nothing of good forensic value that we could come up with at that time.
With more questions than answers, detectives turn their attention back to the note Barbara's friend Jerry had found earlier in Barbara's car.
They found a victim, shot multiple times, and then someone else finds this note in her car that says she's leaving to be with her people. And what's the purpose of this?
The investigators were wondering if the note was even authored by Barbara, so they do some handwriting analysis on it and sent it out to have that done.
While detectives await results, the autopsy report comes in.
At that time, they came up with 6 bullet hole entrance wounds. The shot in the arm was probably the bullet that killed her because it went back into the chest and hit some vital organs. And the final wounds were when Barbara was turned over and on her stomach, and the entrance wounds were in her back.
Being shot in the back is a good indicator that the person is known by the assailant. He doesn't want to see their face when he kills them.
At the autopsy, the medical examiner took swabs of both her rectum and her vaginal area to try to preserve any evidence that might be there.
The autopsy report indicated no definitive evidence that she had been sexually assaulted.
With the autopsy offering no new leads, investigators turn their focus to any romantic relationships Barbara may have had.
They were talking with the roommates more about other men that may be in Barbara's life, and they came up with a guy named Richard. They knew that Barbara was very much infatuated with him. She spoke about him all the time, even called him her boyfriend.
As police focus on Richard, they make a disturbing discovery.
They had asked if Richard had ever been violent towards Barbara, and Barbara had relayed one story that Richard had pulled a dagger on her and said he was going to stab her.
This was not the only alarming story Barbara's roommates relayed to detectives.
About a month before Barbara was murdered, she reported that her gun was missing, and that raises all kinds of concerns. She reported it to campus police, and to my knowledge, she never got that gun back. A .357 revolver would have fit with the potential murder weapon that killed Barbara. She had expressed concern to her roommates that the person that had taken the gun may use that gun on her, and the roommates just kind of dismissed it. But now that Barbara was found shot to death, the roommates were concerned for themselves as well. Having that information, the investigators really wanted to find out who Richard was. At this point, all we have is Richard's first name. He's willing to maybe take a dagger and stab her.
We strongly felt that he could have been responsible for her murder.
Three days have passed since student Barbara Rocky was discovered shot dead in Big Cottonwood Canyon. And police are hunting a man named Richard, who they believe is her boyfriend.
This could be the person that killed Barbara, but all we have is Richard's first name, and so we're kind of running into a dead end.
With no way to identify their potential prime suspect, detectives catch a lucky break.
Out of the blue, a guy named Richard Finder calls into our department and tells us that he knew Barbara Rockey.
Richard Finder initiated contact, offering his services to basically try to help them solve this case.
First question we had was, is this the Richard that we've been looking for?
As investigators prepare to meet with Richard Finder, they learn everything they can about him.
We find out that he's in his 30s and he's a self-proclaimed psychic. He lived in California. Barbara was from California, so that was one of the connections that they had. We also found out that a .357 pistol was registered to him, which is obviously the same caliber that we're looking for.
Richard Finder arrives at the sheriff's office, and detectives begin by asking him about his relationship with the 22-year-old college student.
Barbara heard Richard Finder on the radio talking about the occult. Barbara had called into the radio station. They ended up exchanging phone numbers. Barbara had gone up to see him at his hotel, and I think Barbara at one point even felt that Richard was her boyfriend. Richard claimed that it was just a spiritual relationship, that he looked at Barbara not in a physical way.
Under further questioning, Richard mentions something that gets the detectives' attention.
The place that he was staying at was very close to the mouth of the canyon where it was that Barbara Jean was found.
Detectives cut to the chase and ask Richard where he was on March 11th, the day that Barbara was killed.
He tells them that he was in Salt Lake at the time of the murder. He said that he had gotten up and had some breakfast, and then he went over and helped a friend do some construction work on a house all day long, and then he went back home and went to sleep on the couch.
Detectives set to work checking out Richard's alibi.
The guy that Richard Finder was staying with did confirm that Richard was with him in the evening, but he could not confirm the times that Richard told us about during the daytime.
With holes in Richard's alibi, detectives dig deeper into his claims about his relationship with Barbara.
Our investigators talked to Barbara's therapist, and she just really got the impression that Barbara was in love with Richard.
The therapist reveals another way the relationship was less innocent than Richard made it seem.
Barbara described Richard as a great warlock and maybe even a devil worshiper.
I think that the satanic and the witchcraft, it's not too far-fetched to think, okay, somebody took her up there into the woods. This was potentially a sacrifice.
When police confront Richard with these allegations, his response is even more alarming.
He's telling us that he's having these dreams and that she was shot in the back in a triangular pattern, and that's a sign of a possible Satan killing or devil worship. Richard also told us that he had a vision that the murder weapon was also thrown into water. How would he know that we didn't have the murder weapon? So that really raised a question to us. We're wondering, is this guy confessing to us? Is he telling us about our crime scene? He has all of this knowledge. Is this guy the one that killed Barbara that day?
When you start putting all of these things together, it made Richard Finder a pretty good suspect.
Despite the circumstantial evidence stacking up against him, detectives need something more concrete.
So we collect all of his weapons for ballistic tests with the projectiles that we located from Barbara's body. We received the results from the ballistics test, and they were not a match. And that pretty much blew up most of our case with Richard Finder.
Detectives pin their hopes on the results of the handwriting analysis on the note found in Barbara's vehicle.
Maybe she wrote the note under duress. Maybe she was forced to write the note.
That could be a significant clue, especially if it's determined that our victim didn't author the note. It's like someone's writing a suicide note for someone else.
The handwriting analysis came back and it showed that Barbara was the one that had written the note.
The letter itself seemed to be a valid letter to her friends, and several people said that's Barbara's handwriting.
The investigators concluded that maybe Barbara was thinking about moving home and she was just explaining that in the note. At this point, we're starting to run out of leads.
As the investigation stalls, Barbara's family is rocked by another tragedy.
My dad would call the police practically every day when nothing was coming to fruition. And he died like within a year after she died.
It killed my father. And we had so many key relatives die, still wanting to know what happened to Barbara.
Detectives never give up on the case, and a year later, in 1975, they notice a disturbing pattern of crimes.
There's women all over the American West that are going missing and being discovered dead.
College co-eds with dark hair were found murdered, and the serial killer was certainly the big topic of conversation.
A surprising arrest changes the whole course of the investigation.
In 1975, a Utah State trooper makes an arrest west of Salt Lake City.
The suspect was arrested for a kidnapping case, and some of the evidence in the vehicle definitely could have had something to do with Barbara's murder as well.
The driver's name is Ted Bundy.
This guy turns out to be probably the most famous, notorious serial killer of all time. Is he the one that killed Barbara?
A year and a half after the murder of Barbara Rockey, the investigation is sparked back into life by the arrest of notorious serial killer Ted Bundy.
More and more that police start investigating Ted Bundy, the more connections they find to missing and murdered women all over the country.
In 1974, Ted Bundy was also in the Utah area, going to school at the University of Utah.
Barbara Jean fit Ted Bundy's profile.
She was a college student. She was a brunette, and she was the age that Ted Bundy seemed to target.
Ted Bundy had a reputation of being a very charming man. You know, he was a good-looking guy and was kind of a smooth talker.
Ted Bundy would act like he was hurt and ask for some assistance from a female, and that would have fit right with the personality of Barbara. She would have helped Ted Bundy if he had approached her.
With Barbara fitting the profile of Bundy's victims, detectives connect with the FBI.
The investigators were able to get a hold of a timeline that the FBI had prepared, find out what his whereabouts were on March 11, 1974. When the investigators looked at Ted Bundy's timeline, they found that he had an ironclad alibi for that day because he was in Washington committing another murder.
With Bundy cleared, the Barbara Rockey investigation grinds to a halt.
The investigators had done everything forensically that they could. They had done all the interviews that they could. They had looked at all the suspects that they could, and the case just went cold.
Once the case was cold, we pretty much accepted that it was not going to be solved.
When a case goes cold, it definitely affects the family every bit as much, if not more, than the investigator. They just want someone to be held accountable for their daughter's death.
The case lies unsolved for 30 years, while Barbara's family yearns for answers.
The hope and the drive to crack this case someday was powered by losing so many family members that were enraged and wanted justice. So we had nothing to lose by trying.
In 2005, Barbara's loved ones make one last push for justice.
I asked Mom, I said, do you want me to try to open this? And she said yes, because I need to know before I die.
I was a fairly new homicide detective, and my phone rang, and it was one of the family members saying, hey, my sister was killed back in 1974. Our mom's getting up in years, and she'd really like to know who killed her daughter.
The family would expect us to just do what needs to be done to solve their case, and you can't put a price tag on this level of justice.
Digging into the 30-year-old case files, detectives' attention is drawn to one suspect in particular, the self-proclaimed psychic, Richard Finder.
I was not convinced that law enforcement had closed the door all the way on Richard Finder.
I wanted to look into Richard further because the timeline to me wasn't rock solid, and I wanted to try to look more into the forensic end of it. DNA and the ballistic stuff has come a long ways since 1974. As I'm looking through each piece of evidence, I'm trying to figure out if that would have any forensic benefit to having tested.
While evidence from the original crime scene is sent to the crime lab, investigators dig deeper into Richard's version of events.
As I started looking at Richard's alibi, I spoke with some of the same people that the investigators had spoke with previously.
As we reinvestigated and re-interviewed these people, information that wasn't known back then was revealed.
What I learned was that Richard had been dating and seeing a friend of Barbara's, Janelle. But then Barbara also found that Janelle was getting closer to Richard Finder than Barbara was, and there was some animosity from what I understand regarding that.
I learned that sometime very close to the murder, Richard had left town with Janelle Bach, and Richard and Janelle became boyfriend and girlfriend, and that was kind of a blow to Barbara. That really kind of stuck out to me.
Janelle came back to Salt Lake for 3 or 4 days around the time of the homicide with Richard Finder, and they were staying at a house just west of the mouth of the canyon where Barbara was found.
Had Barbara confronted Richard about Janelle, only for the encounter to turn fatal?
Because of this relationship between Janelle and Barbara, and because Richard Finder supposedly had guns, and then because of his witchcraft and the possibility of human sacrifice, Richard Finder was up there on the list as a potential suspect.
Investigators try to bring Richard in for another interview.
Unfortunately, we found that Richard Finder had passed away.
But really, the only avenue I had was to go talk with Janelle.
Was Janelle the only living person who knew what really happened to Barbara?
I didn't see any information in the case file where Janelle Bach had really given a good interview about Richard Finder, and so that was the place that I wanted to start.
Barbara was upset that Janelle had essentially taken Richard Finder, so when they came back, there's this potential triangle and some jealousy. It placed some suspicion on Janelle.
Anytime an investigation reveals some sort of a love triangle, that can easily turn deadly when there's jealousy involved, and all of a sudden, the whole thing shifts from one guy to the person that's least suspected.
Three decades after Barbara Rockey was found murdered in a Utah canyon, cold case detectives want to speak to Barbara's former roommate, Janelle, who had been dating Richard Finder, the psychic Barbara had fallen in love with.
Janelle was looked at because of this triangle and this dispute, and Richard Finder was aware that there was this jealousy.
Detectives want to know if either Richard or Janelle had the opportunity to kill Barbara.
They were back in Salt Lake for 3 or 4 days on a ski trip during the time of Barbara's demise, but they never went skiing. And they were staying at a place that was close to the crime scene where Barbara was found.
Janelle was able to give me a timeline that she was with Richard that day, and the hours that she wasn't coincided with the times from the initial investigation.
It was confirmed with others that she was very sick when she came up here. She didn't even leave the house, and she was being taken care of by Richard Finder during the time of the homicide and was not in that area.
Janelle Bach was able to give me enough information to make me feel that he definitely was not the killer of Barbara, and she was not a suspect any longer.
Undeterred, detectives scour through the files from 1974, looking for details the original investigators may have missed.
As I was going through the case file, Jerry Hicker's name kept popping up.
So Jerry's early role in the case was he was one of the last people to allegedly have seen Barbara Jean at about 10 o'clock in the morning.
He reported her missing, so he really wasn't somebody that they were looking at as having a role in her death.
They were really good friends. That came through in the investigation, but I wasn't satisfied about him not being a suspect.
Detectives reach out to Barbara's former roommates, asking them about Jerry.
Some of the roommates told me that, Jerry just didn't have a lot of friends, and Barbara was accepting of everybody. And Jerry just kind of latched on to Barbara, and I think Jerry had more romantic feelings for Barbara than Barbara did for him.
I think that the roommates kind of looked at Jerry as basically kind of a stray pet that people were taking care of.
He just didn't seem like somebody who would kill somebody.
When investigators dig into Jerry's life after Barbara's murder, they make a disturbing discovery.
Jerry had been accused of rape in the Provo area after Barbara's murder.
When I found that Jerry was arrested for a sexual assault, I want to know, could Jerry have been the one that killed Barbara? Barbara's roommate had been away from Jerry for a long time. In the interviews, I found out that Jerry really had an obsession with guns, and that he helped Barbara find the .357 that she bought. He took her out, showed her how to shoot the .357.
Jerry would always tell Barbara about how to load her firearm, leaving one of the cylinders in the revolver empty, and then looking back and seeing that Barbara was shot 5 times. Is that relevant in this case?
We actually looked at the ME's report, and we couldn't really determine if she had been shot 5 or 6 times. There was the opinion that it was 6, but it could have also been through the re-entries and fragments, could have been 5.
As I'm going through these interviews and I'm listening to what the roommates are telling me, he was a rock-solid suspect at this point.
Detectives race to track down Jerry Hicker.
I went to Jerry Hicker's house in Washington. I explained to him that I was looking at the Barbara Rocky case. Jerry immediately said, you'll have to talk with my attorney, and that he wasn't going to give me a statement. So at that point, I had nothing else to do but leave.
With Jerry refusing to cooperate, investigators must find concrete evidence to link him to Barbara's murder.
We wanted to see if with today's technology, that if there was a sexual assault, that there might be something suitable for DNA testing.
I was pretty excited to find that a vaginal and rectal swab had been taken on Barbara, because by now we were utilizing DNA testing, and I thought that I was going to be able to match those up with DNA that we got from whatever suspects were in the case file.
Investigators hope that the swab test results will point toward Jerry.
They didn't know about DNA in 1974, and they packaged everything in plastic. Because it was packaged in plastic, it ruined any DNA that was in any of the biological material that was taken. I was devastated. I thought I was going to be able to solve that case really quickly, but that's not what happened.
Fearing that the case will go cold again without solid evidence, investigators gamble on another way to obtain the evidence they're looking for.
I took items that had not been tested yet from the original evidence to our crime lab to have them tested.
The original crime scene evidence includes a soil sample from beneath Barbara's body.
I was just more or less taking the dirt out to have a sample taken in case some seminal fluid had migrated down into the dirt.
There was still the belief, based on the scene and everything, that there was a possibility of a sexual assault.
When I got the results of the test, surprisingly, we got a match that there was DNA from the soil that was underneath Barbara's body.
After 30 years, had DNA analysis finally identified Barbara's killer?
And what came back as a result of that testing was shocking.
It's been 33 years since student Barbara Rocky was found stripped and shot in Big Cottonwood Canyon, Utah. In 2007, DNA in a soil sample from under her body finally reveals her killer.
Finding that DNA in the soil was like finding a needle in a haystack, a big haystack.
The results come in, and we've got a match, and it's Jerry Hicker.
Just that little bit of information was all that we needed to link Jerry Hicker to this crime scene. He was not who we suspected initially. And so to learn that he was the one responsible for killing her was very surprising.
On November 6th, 2007, 56-year-old Jerry Hicker is charged with the first-degree murder of Barbara Rocky.
When I first found out that the killer of Barbara was Jerry Hicker, I was surprised because I heard that he was just sort of a guy from next door.
It was a shock. I never thought it would be solved.
As prosecutors prepare for their day in court, they piece together a theory of how Jerry killed Barbara.
So our belief of what happened was Jerry Hicker knew that Barbara may be leaving because that next morning, and he was aware of the letter before he brought the car back.
I think what tipped him over the edge was he wanted Barbara sexually, and her rejection and her indication of leaving Jerry was more than he could take.
Hicker winds up talking Rocky into going up Big Cottonwood Canyon with this scenic view one more time before she leaves.
And when they get to this spot, Jerry's trying to put the moves on Barbara, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with Jerry that way.
Hicker takes out a gun, and in rage, he tells her to strip down, and she was probably folding the clothes in order to buy herself a little more time.
Barbara's pleading for her life. She's just trying to get anything into Jerry's mind to not do this.
And then he shot her, apparently while she was standing up. And then she went down, and then he shot her 4 times in the lower back region.
After the murder, Jerry tried to cover his tracks.
Jerry has to drive back to campus. He gets rid of the gun, and he's trying to come up with alibis. He knows he can't park the car right there at Barbara's house, so he takes it over to the Parkway Plaza apartments, and that's where he decides he's going to use this letter making her a missing person.
This was a young woman who trusted somebody. They're supposed to be going to a nice spot, and instead she's shot and murdered.
I felt so horrible knowing that she had gone through something like that. She was probably so scared. Nobody deserved to die like that. Nobody.
I believe that Jerry was being a concerned, loving friend, and that may have put some thoughts in the investigator's mind that there's just no way Jerry could have done this.
Beneath the facade just seemed to be rage and anger that he'd been rejected.
I think Jerry Hicker was a sexual predator. They got away with a lot of crimes.
We were so glad and so grateful that the detectives had worked so hard. It boggled my mind that they could solve it after 34 years.
Despite an airtight case against Jerry, his declining health leaves prosecutors with a new dilemma.
When I went to arrest Jerry, he had been diagnosed with cancer. He was just the shell of a man. We didn't feel that his lifespan was much of 5 years, if that.
So we worked out a deal that he would plead to a substantially reduced charge of manslaughter, and that he would be sentenced to the prison for 5 years, figuring that that would be a life sentence.
Going with the plea deal was my mom's decision. She wanted him to say in his own words that he did it. She wanted those answers.
Jerry Hicker serves 3 years in Utah State Prison, and in 2014, 5 years after pleading guilty, he dies of cancer.
I bet you he had been looking over his shoulders all these years. I felt that his ill health was Barbara's justice.
This is somebody that wasted away not only his life, he ruined so many people's lives by his selfish act. Barbara didn't deserve this. She had so much ahead of her, but the family does have some answers. That's the goal in my investigation.
I think that in this case, justice was served and that the family got answers that they would not have otherwise had.
The thing I miss most about Barbara was the times that we used to blast Beatles music and sing and dance for hours.
दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी भाईया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा विच ना छोड़ी भाईया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा विच ना छोड़ी छोड़ी तेरा विच ना छोड़ी तेरा विच ना छोड़ी तेरा विच ना छोड़ी थोड़ निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े थोड़ निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे छोड़े मुका दे दे ओ फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे सजना दे छोड़े नी बहुत कोल वध के लोगो सजना दे छोड़े नी प्यार भुला गया प्यार भुला गया रातां दे जगराते मत साडे वे लागे आए रातां दे जगराते मत साडे वे लागे आए तेरी याद सताती है तेरी याद सताती है वो दिन बेचैन लगे रात नींद न आती है दिन बेचैन लगे रात नींद न आती है दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी, दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी, दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी, दिल दुखियां दा ना तोड़ी। भाइया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा बिच ना छोड़ी, भाइया समझा छोड़ो या तेरा बिच ना छोड़ी। तेरा बिच ना छोड़ी, तेरा बिच ना छोड़ी, तेरा बिच ना छोड़ी, तेरा बिच ना छोड़ी। और निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े, और निभा छोड़ी दिल जिंदगी तेरे थोड़े। छोड़े मुका दे दे, छोड़े मुका दे दे, छोड़े मुका दे दे, छोड़े मुका दे दे। ओ फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे, फितरत सोनिया दी दिल ला के दगा दे दे। सजना दे छोड़े नी, बहुत कोल वध के लोगो सजना दे छोड़े नी। ये प्यार भुला गया है, प्यार भुला गया है। रातां दे जगराते बट साढ़े वे ला के आए,